With an out-of-this-world intelligence, he starts manufacturing an Iron Man armor. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 76. I should know something about the system, but when the others came forward and took a look, they finally understood why Zihuan was stunned on the spot, because so far, the materials they have seen are basically some common materials, although there are still many requirements in terms of types, at least more than 10 kinds in total, but the quantity ratio is extremely rare, and even each portion will not require too much, and the price of this whole portion will not even exceed 100. But the current market price of the world's top materials has been sold for several thousand per kilogram. There is no comparison between the two. If they take the materials of this mecha out to sell, I am afraid that other countries will even pay millions to buy 1 kilogram, and they will be very happy. After all, in terms of materials, no matter what you do, you need them. So this is an indispensable part. The more they thought about it, the more strange the eyes of the others looked at the ingredient list in front of them again. Are you serious? After a moment, Professor Huang couldn't help but speak dryly. Lin Shen nodded casually. That's it. It's just that the ingredients are a little different. Different proportions can produce different properties. As long as any metals are fully functional and integrated, their essence will also undergo a qualitative change. This is the material used in the current mecha. While speaking, Lin Shen waved his hand. So you know why I don't care about those scraps at all. At this time, Zihuan and Professor Wang were finally convinced. If they had known that the material of this mecha was so ordinary, let alone scraps, even if several tons of materials were placed here, they probably wouldn't even look at them. But now that Zihuan has actually said it, he can't just slap himself in the face. The lady could only speak stubbornly. Even if these materials are cheap, it doesn't matter. Any material needs money to buy, then we can't make good use of it. I will deal with these materials. You can do what you need to do. Zihuan waved his hand, and everyone saw his stubborn look and grinned. In this way, their concerns seemed to have completely disappeared. Lin Shen had solved all the technical problems that had been giving them a headache, even when they were still wondering whether the materials they thought were very rare could be mass-produced. Lin Shen told them that they only needed some common materials to fuse them. So what was there to worry about? Just get started. But before leaving, Lin Shen stopped Professor Wang, who was about to leave. Do we have any computer talents around us? I also need to make a system specifically for the mecha, but it may be a bit troublesome for me to do all this alone. That's right, Lin Shen was talking about possibilities. After all, he had a system with a superb understanding. So no matter what he did, it was just something he needed to comprehend. But he still had to work on the weapons, and he naturally couldn't do the system himself. So let's find someone to do it for him. It didn't matter if he didn't have talents on his side, but he didn't believe that Zihuan and Professor Wang didn't have talents either. Professor Wang was slightly stunned when he heard this, and then a hint of doubt flashed in his eyes. Make a system specifically for mechas? Isn't this a bit of an exaggeration? And with the current level of technology, I feel that our system is already the best in the world. When he said this, a hint of pride flashed across Professor Huang's face. That's true, but I feel that there are still some flaws if it is used in mechas. And I have already written the improvement plan. I just need to bring someone to complete it. As for me, I still have other things to do. Lin Shen spread his hands helplessly. Hearing this, Zihuan, who was originally preparing to leave for research, suddenly began to grit his teeth. Lin boy, don't tell me that you have also made achievements in the field of intelligent ion systems. Lin Shen nodded nonchalantly. I am talented, so what? The rest of the people twitched their mouths when they heard this, and then there was no delay at all. They started their tasks directly. Everyone was extremely sad and angry. Is this still something a human can do? Which normal person is proficient in so many aspects? And Lin Shen said that he has dabbled in every aspect, so he is naturally the top one. Let's not talk about other things. Just the full-body exoskeleton armor is not something that ordinary people can make. Even Zihuan, an old academician, led his team to study for several years without any progress, but now it has been directly analyzed. That can naturally prove this point. I will solve this matter for you. In fact, let alone me, even if you go to find the people above, they would like you to find more. The people who can be brought out by you are basically the top in an industry. When Professor Wang said this, his face was still obviously helpless. The others nodded in agreement. That's the truth. Most of the time, they even wanted to pry open Lin Shen's head to see what was inside. Why can a freshman like him master so much knowledge? This is simply unreasonable. When he heard that Professor Wang would help him solve it, Lin Shen nodded with satisfaction and left to deal with his own affairs. Professor Wang was also very efficient. Someone had come to report to him at noon about what he had said that morning, but when he saw the person in front of him, Lin Shen almost spit out his tea, because the person standing in front of him was a beautiful woman in her early 20s. With short hair draped over her head, she looked a bit heroic. It was a pity that the pair of gold-rimmed glasses made the originally slightly harmonious atmosphere a bit weird. After just a glance, Lin Shen retracted his gaze. After all, he had a girlfriend. Hello, my name is Wang Menyao. Are you the genius my grandfather talked about? Wang Menyao looked at Lin Shen with curiosity in her eyes, and at the same time, she stretched out her hand generously. Lin Shen was slightly stunned. He didn't expect that the person in front of him was actually Professor Wang's granddaughter. However, she did not make any achievements in science and technology, but became a genius in computers. Suddenly, they all felt a little amused. However, he also stretched out his hand and shook it gently with the other party, and then began to talk about the system. Chapter 77 A system far beyond the divine power. The more in-depth the communication, the more Wang Menyao was surprised to find that this young man, who was 2 years younger than her, had a very high level of computer skills. Some of the professional terms he used were not even useful to her. Even after just chatting for a while, Wang Menyao felt that she had benefited a lot. Thinking of this, she was suddenly shocked, and even showed deep shock in her eyes. She remembered that she had not had this feeling for many years. The last time she had such a feeling of enlightenment was at a lecture by a world-class professor. Isn't Lin Shen comparable to a world-class professor? Although she was not willing to believe it, it was a fact after all. Thinking of this, Wang Menyao's face slowly showed a look of respect. For her, age is not a standard for judging people. The principle that the capable are the teachers is what she always believes in. Since Lin Shen is more capable than her, she will naturally ask for advice as seriously as she would a senior. That's all I have in mind for now. I'll give you the rest of the report later. If this system is built, I think it will surpass all the systems currently available in the world. Lin Shen spoke with unparalleled confidence, and even Wang Menyao was deeply moved at this moment, although he thought it was unlikely. After all, Lin Shen was talking about the whole world. To be honest, she was not sure about the whole country, let alone the whole world. Although she was one of the best in the computer field among the younger generation, she was far behind other professors. Then, Lin Shen found a quieter office for Wang Menyao, which would be Wang Menyao's office for a period of time in the future. 10 minutes later, when Wang Menyao looked at the plain report in her hand, her face was full of shock. She stared at every detail in the report with wide eyes, trying to find some unreasonable places. But the more she looked down, the more shocked she felt, because the things in this report, from a practical point of view, can definitely be done, and the way of using them is also a way that no one has used so far. Before seeing this report, Wang Menyao had never thought that the code could be run in this way. Now I believe that if this system is completed, it will definitely become the best in the world. As far as I know, no one in China, or even in the world, can touch your brand new way of operation. After reading the report, Wang Menyao took a deep breath, switched to the running program, and began to work attentively. In a sense, although she is not a scientific researcher, she has a personality similar to that of a scientific researcher. That is, once she comes into contact with something on the computer, she will also fall into research like crazy, and she will not sleep or rest. In the blink of an eye, half a month has passed, and Lin Shen has successfully completed the part of his weapon improvement, and the transformation is very successful. Next, He only needs to wait for the assembly of the mecha, and then test the weapon. Wang Menyao's system has also been completed. In this half-month, Lin Shen's perception of Wang Menyao has also changed greatly. Whenever the other party has any questions, he will come directly to ask, like Zihuan and other researchers. She didn't have the pride that she should have at her age, but was extremely humble. In terms of ability, Lin Shen also admired her. The system he designed would take at least 10 days to complete even if he wanted to, but Wang Menyao was able to finish it in half a month. Lin Shen couldn't help but sigh at her ability. Lin Shen, the system research has been completed, now we just need to wait for the test. At this moment, Lin Shen was standing in the factory quietly observing the assembly of the machinery, and the others around him were also standing here. At this time, with the concerted efforts of everyone, most of the mecha had been completed. It would take at most a week for this improved new mecha to be born. Hearing Wang Menyao's voice, everyone turned their heads to look over. Oh, so fast? How is the simulation result? Lin Shen's eyes showed a slight surprise, but he also asked quickly, the simulation results are the same as expected. And this data, after my comparison, has far exceeded all the computer systems that are currently operating in my country. Even the most advanced supercomputer in our country, the Light of Divine Power, cannot replace the calculations of this system. As soon as these words came out, everyone present couldn't help but exclaim. As for the current supercomputers in our country, even ordinary people have heard of its reputation. This supercomputer is equipped with 40,960 Shin 26010 multi-core processors, with a peak performance of 12.5 quadrillion times per second, a sustained performance of 9.3 quadrillion times per second, and a core operating frequency of 1.5 GHz. Even in the world, it is one of the top supercomputers. But Wang Menyao said that the new system can't even compare to this supercomputer. Isn't it far superior to any supercomputer system in the world? If such a system is installed on the Light of Divine Power, then the Light of Divine Power will become the only top computer in the world. But everyone knows that such a system is a mecha system designed by Lin Shen. That's right, but it will take another week to complete the manufacturing of the mecha. Let's try to test it after it is completed. I believe the actual test will not disappoint you. Lin Shen smiled and the others around him nodded. They are now looking forward to the new test of the mecha. Everyone has compared the data of the improved mecha with the original one. In terms of weapons, it can be said to be a crushing victory. Although there are not many changes in other aspects, the combat effectiveness has increased several times. And the biggest role of the mecha is not its incomparable combat effectiveness. After doing all this, Lin Shen turned his head and looked at Ling Zhen. Just now, Ling Zhen asked him another key question, and now that the system problem has been solved, it is natural to continue to complete the task. Just now, when Wang Menyao saw this scene, her eyes flickered slightly, but she quickly restrained this ray of light. After that, after saying something to Professor Wang, he left again. Lin Shen wrote this report to show that it brought great inspiration to Wang Menyao. She even had a vague idea that she could research something new, so now she had to strike while the iron was hot. Chapter 78 completed. Testing started. Professor Wang, who was watching his granddaughter leave from a distance, glanced at Lin Shen with a subtle look in his eyes. Then he sighed with some regret. He naturally knew that Ling Zhen already had a girlfriend, and it was Ling Zhen who studied hard beside him. That's why he felt sorry. If Lin Shen didn't have a girlfriend, maybe he would want to match him up. After shaking his head, he continued to immerse himself in his research. A week passed in a flash, and at this time everyone in the entire factory was standing in front of the assembled machine, looking at the mechanical arms that spread throughout the factory. They kept working. In front of them, a red-painted mecha was being slowly assembled. Compared with the previous mecha, the height of this mecha is only 6 meters. Although it is much smaller than the previous mecha, its power should not be underestimated, because the smaller size naturally means that it becomes more flexible. In addition, the weapon system of this mecha has been specially improved, not to mention that it also has the most powerful system in the world, and that system was officially named the Dragoon system by Lin Shen. It is precisely because of the name of the system that the paint surface of the mecha is dyed bright red. After the mecha takes off, it will naturally look like a giant dragon soaring in the sky. 2 hours later, the mecha has been installed. The scarlet appearance, coupled with the huge size, gives everyone an extremely sharp murderous aura. This is still a mecha that has not been started. Once the mecha is successfully started, perhaps the feeling will be even more terrifying. Finally done. Zihuan was looking at the mecha in front of him with a fanatical face. His whole body was trembling slightly with excitement, and Professor Wang on the side was naturally not much better. I have been thinking that everyone except Lin Shen has been excited to the point of being speechless. After all, this is the first mecha they have participated in making. Although Wang Menyao did not participate in the fake production, she has developed a system belonging to the mecha after all. Naturally, she also has a sense of participation in it. At the same time, it was her first time to see a real mecha, so she was naturally looking forward to the scene of the mecha test. Contact the chief immediately and arrange the mecha test. Professor Wang quickly arranged it. Only 20 minutes later, the chief finally strode into the factory. He naturally knew that Lin Shen wanted to improve the mecha, so since that day, the chief has lived directly in the Ice City and has not left, and he is waiting for today. The recorder is in place and can start the mecha test at any time. The recorder who came with the chief is now staring at the mecha in front of him with enthusiasm, although he knew the purpose of his work this time and was mentally prepared. But when he really saw the mecha, it would be a lie to say that he was not shocked. A strong sense of pride emerged in his heart. After all, this is a mecha developed by their country. It is far beyond the current world's top eagle sauce. Lin Shen nodded slightly, and then took Ling Xun into the mecha again. That's right, this time the test was still operated by him personally. As for Ling Xun, he was just a bystander. Everyone was very envious of Ling Xun. After all, being able to actually sit in a mecha and feel its power was a very exciting thing. However, Ling Xun was Lin Shen's girlfriend after all, so everyone would naturally give her some privileges. Moreover, after the test was completed, the mecha would be fully handed over to the top leaders of their country. After that, they could test it in any way they wanted, right? So there was no need to be too envious. Start. Lin Shen's voice fell calmly. The mecha is initialized and loaded. The Dragoon system is being installed, and the mecha data is being debugged in batches. Initialization completed. The data is normal, and it can be started at any time. After a series of mechanical sounds, the eyes of the mecha began to flash with scarlet light. The vector jet nozzle behind it had also started to warm up in advance. Enter the master operation mode. Lin Shen's voice fell, and the mode of the mecha switched quickly. He nodded with satisfaction. In fact, this was the effect he wanted. Being able to switch modes at will without the need for manual operation as he had before was simply many times more convenient. If in an emergency, the opportunity to attack or escape is missed due to the problem of mode. This is definitely one of the black spots of the mecha. But now the mecha equipped with the Dragoon system naturally solves this problem perfectly. However, in the future, he will have to come forward to control the mecha. He simply began to announce some of the mecha tests and promotion levels. Just like taking a driver's license test, only those who pass a higher level of driver's license are allowed to open a higher level of operation mode. After all, the higher the mode, the more powerful the mecha can be operated. Later, some locking functions can be added to the system. Of course, emergency situations can be released at will. After the mode was switched, Lin Shen just pressed a few buttons at random, and the mecha began to slowly rise. The vector jet nozzle behind it sprayed a faint blue light, gorgeous and dazzling. After a gust of strong wind, the mecha had arrived above the factory area, but this time it did not fly too high, because there was a mecha test field 5 kilometers outside the factory area. It was after Lin Shen mentioned it to the leader last time that he arranged people to come and start building it overnight, and the construction was completed very quickly. The construction of the test was completed in just 3 days. At the same time, there were several abandoned tanks inside, which were the best means for testing. If it was just replaced with ordinary steel or stone, even Iron Man armor could penetrate it at will. But it was different if it was replaced with a tank. The tank's defense capability can even withstand small missiles to a certain extent. And everyone hurriedly left the factory, but they did not get too close to the test site, but equipped telescopes outside the factory for observation. If they were too close, the attack of the mecha would be extremely terrifying, and it would be bad if they were affected. Within a range of 5 kilometers, the situation in front could be clearly seen through the telescope. In addition, the observation recorder also released a remote-controlled drone, which was observing the situation of the test site from about 1,000 meters high. The mecha is in place, waiting for the start command. Lin Shen spoke to the channel in front of him. The leader also spoke to the communication machine in his hand. The observation test is in place. Start the test. Chapter 79 Power Test. Nuclear Level. Hearing the voice, Lin Shen did not respond but nodded silently. Then, under his control, the mecha's dual shoulder guns were mobilized from the back. With the sound of clacking, it was in place in just 2 or 3 seconds, and in the direction facing, there happened to be a tank that was almost scrapped. Although the tank was almost scrapped, the outer armor was still intact. It was just past the normal service life, so it was not repaired and was treated as scrapped. But if it was specially modified by someone with a heart, then this tank would become one of the top armored vehicles. Fire! As Lin Shen's calm voice fell, the mecha's dual shoulder guns quickly began to charge. In just 1 second, the light blue beam on the shoulder had condensed into shape. Suddenly, everyone in the distance was amazed. They had naturally seen this picture through the satellite image before. It was just that it was across the screen at that time, and now it was just through the telescope. So the difference between them must be different. Even the shocking effect brought to them was completely different. They could even vaguely feel a sense of oppression. The next second, accompanied by a dazzling blue light, a laser-like beam flew out instantly and sank into the tank. Everyone was stunned, because there was no movement at the moment when the light hit. Just when they were still wondering, there was a sudden explosion where the tank was originally. A violent explosion occurred directly in that place, and even the terrifying explosion effect was almost turning into a small mushroom cloud. And from the time of questioning to now, only 2 seconds have passed. Hiss! Countless people couldn't help but take a breath of cold air. They looked at the place where the small mushroom cloud rose, and their faces showed a strong look of horror. The effect of this thing, it won't be a nuclear explosion. The chief was not involved in the production, so the horror on his face became more and more intense when he saw this scene. You know, this place is very close to the city. If the effect of a nuclear explosion really occurs, then they will play big this time. Don't worry, Chief. Although this thing is charged by nuclear power, it will be converted into hydrogen power in the process. So there is no need to worry about nuclear pollution from the explosion. These things will completely dissipate in just 1 or 2 hours. Zihuan and Professor Wang explained to the side. Although the chief did not understand the principle, he knew the outcome, so he slowly breathed a sigh of relief. As long as there is no nuclear pollution, it will be fine. At the same time, although the chief is not a professional, he also understands hydrogen power. This thing will not cause any pollution to the environment. It is completely energy-saving and environmentally friendly. But this power is really too great. The mushroom cloud rising in the distance took several minutes to slowly dissipate. Even the vibration on the ground also disappeared. Until this time, everyone looked at each other, and their faces were still horrified. Then they were full of excitement. Such an explosion can even produce a mushroom cloud like a nuclear explosion, and the vibration brought to the ground is even like an earthquake. Such a terrifying power is something that even intercontinental missiles cannot do. To match such power, at least nuclear weapons can do it. But nuclear weapons are the most important weapons of the country. No one will use them when they have to. After the mushroom cloud dissipated, everyone raised their telescopes and looked forward again. They could see that the abandoned tank in the pit had disappeared without a trace. Not even a slag was left. Seeing this, the others couldn't help but gasp. That was a military tank, although it was already abandoned. But at least the armor on the outside still had a very terrifying defensive capability, and now it was directly blasted into slag by a cannon, without even a little residue left. A pit with a width of more than 100 meters and a depth of 3 or 4 meters appeared on the ground. This is just the power of one shot. What if it is fired continuously? Before today, no one could have imagined that the power of this thing would be so much greater than they imagined. No wonder they were able to blow up a satellite in space. Let alone a satellite, Even a space station can be blown up. Seeing this, Zihuan couldn't help but sigh. The chief who heard this turned his head and looked at him in confusion. What satellite? How come I didn't know about this? When this was said, everyone was stunned. Zihuan showed a little embarrassment on his face, but he didn't hide what happened before. The chief's mouth twitched slightly when he heard this, and a helpless expression appeared on his face, but then the helplessness turned into a smile. Great, no one informed me of such a good thing, but the power of the mecha is really terrifying. It can actually smash a satellite chain in one go. TSK. At the end, he even TSK twice, obviously very satisfied. The others nodded when they heard this. After all, this is not their own satellite, but the satellite of those guys with eyes on their heads. It is said that the satellite chain was originally used for civilian purposes, but in fact it has already been collected by the government. In addition, its use is not simple, and many countries have long been very dissatisfied with it. If they also knew that a satellite chain was directly blown up, they might laugh and dream about this. Of course, this matter must not be told to others. Now is not the time to tear the face with the eagle sauce. Wait until their strength grows a little more. Even if the other party tears the face, I am afraid they will not dare to confront them openly. Test result rating, nuclear weapon level. After a little search, the leader directly marked it with the top mark. Everyone has no opinion on such an evaluation. Although the power may not be as powerful as a real nuclear weapon, it is actually more terrifying than a nuclear weapon. After all, this thing is instantaneous and has a very long distance. If it attacks in a straight line, according to the data detection, it should be able to fly tens of thousands of meters. After all, this has been tested in space, so it is understandable to put such a label. Chapter 80. The latest definition, science fiction level. After one rating, Lin Shen has already started to prepare for the second rating. This is the melee system mode after the new edition. He was going to design this part before, but later due to the tight time, he only reluctantly designed it. Even the long-range attack method is still relatively monotonous. In addition to the shoulder guns and small missiles, there are no other attack methods. Even if there are, they are just hammered out with fists. But now after the upgrade, it is different. Whether it is long-range or melee, it has been greatly improved. Lin Shen came to a scrapped tank again, and then began to report to the channel. The next test will be the melee test. After the voice fell, the eyes of the others looking forward became more and more focused. Obviously, they are also very much looking forward to the power of melee. On Lin Shen's side, after a little manipulation, he stretched the arm that controlled the mecha behind him, and with a flash of dazzling light, I don't know when the mecha's hand has a hilt-like existence. With a crackling sound, the light blue power began to gather on the surface of the mecha. Then, a light knife that can only be seen in movies appeared instantly. Seeing this, everyone could not help but shout. Everyone's eyes were full of enthusiasm. Obviously, for them, this scene was exactly the same as in the TV. It was completely a product of science fiction. At this time, everyone felt that the blood in their bodies seemed to have begun to boil. That is the latest development, the laser ion knife. The principle is that through the conversion of nuclear weapons' kinetic energy, the laser, which originally did not have much lethality, is transformed into this appearance. Zihuan muttered to himself when he saw this scene. When the others heard this, they all showed a yearning look on their faces. Obviously, this kind of weapon is very powerful even in science fiction movies. Now it has actually appeared. Lin Shen held the laser ion knife and squatted. Then he raised his hand and a knife fell from the sky. The laser ion knife instantly penetrated the tank and slashed diagonally. After the knife fell, Lin Shen had already controlled the mecha to retreat a distance. It was still about 2 seconds, and a crack began to appear on the tank that was visible to the naked eye. Then with a bang, the tank exploded directly on the spot. This time the explosion was not bad. It was just the explosion caused by the circuit inside the tank. At this time, the tank was still neatly split into 2 parts by a knife, and there was still a little flame burning on the surface. Seeing this terrifying power, countless people couldn't help but take a breath of cold air. They slapped their thighs excitedly, and their waists almost jumped up because of the pain. It succeeded. It really succeeded. I didn't expect that this kind of thing that can only appear in science fiction has actually been created, and this terrifying power. Even the shell of the tank can't withstand it. It means that there is almost nothing in the world that can withstand the power of this laser ion knife, used with the mecha. It is definitely a very terrifying existence. The two old men, Zihuan and Professor Wang, were almost moved to tears. Although this was made by Lin Shen for them, they were also involved in it after all, so they still had a strong sense of participation. The chief on the side also showed a deep look of horror after seeing this terrifying power. However, compared with the terrifying explosion just now, the power this time was a bit mediocre. Close combat power rating, define science fiction. The chief thought for a while and came up with a new definition for this laser ion knife. The others were stunned when they heard this. In their cognition, the highest level of weapons should be defined as nuclear weapons. But what does this science fiction level mean? Is it because this thing doesn't seem to be made in reality? But there should be no problem thinking about it this way. As for the division of strength, you should be able to know it after seeing this science fiction. With the end of these two attacks, the next test finally came to the climax, because this time the test of new weapons is the most important key for the entire mecha. And this part is also a situation that makes countless people's minds open, even Zihuan and his entire team. I didn't expect that Lin Shen could imagine it to this extent. Even this thing is not something that a mecha can accomplish. This is simply against the will of heaven. However, just when the test was about to begin, the chief's phone suddenly rang. He frowned slightly, but still quickly answered the phone. After listening for a while, a helpless expression appeared on his face, and then the corners of his mouth twitched. "Okay, I know. I will deal with this matter." After hanging up the phone, he shouted into the intercom. "The test is suspended for a while. There are some other things here. I will deal with it first." After that, another call was dialed. These people stood quietly by and waited. With the exchange of eyes, they seemed to have understood something, but no one spoke. On the other side, Lin Shen was also waiting silently in the mecha. After a while, the chief finally put down the phone. The explosion just now was detected. He just had people who were close to it and saw the mushroom cloud of the explosion directly. When the chief said this, everyone's guesses had been confirmed. It was exactly as they imagined, and that was why the higher-ups called in such a hurry. Otherwise, it would be such a small matter that they wouldn't have to pay any attention to it. However, the speed of those people made everyone feel amazed. It hadn't been long since he started the test, and only a few minutes had passed since the explosion. Unexpectedly, the news had already started to spread. It attracted the attention of the higher-ups, which shows how terrifying the speed of internet communication is now. Under such circumstances, everyone seemed to be able to imagine what the outcome would be. It was nothing more than another hot stream and hot search on the internet. Don't worry about anything else, just continue testing. Wait until there is a chance to close off the area in the future and renovate it according to the specifications of a military base. Chapter 81, A Headache for the Reward. Since the leader has said so, the others naturally have no big objection to it. Lin Shen continued to test, but this time, even he was a little excited, because this test completely subverted the normal people's cognition. Not only is it a multi-directional attack, but it is also a coverage. In addition, this way of attack is something that no one has ever thought of. As he pressed one of the buttons, the vector thrusters behind the mecha began to slowly spit out a faint blue flame. As the mecha flew into the air, a crackling sound appeared on its body. The next second, the limbs of the mecha actually separated from the mecha itself and flew forward. But the flight trajectory was particularly strange, and it was impossible to register where the mecha was going to fly with the naked eye. In addition, the mecha's own shoulder cannons also began to light up, but after Lin Shen manipulated it for a while, the shoulder cannons dimmed again. Because in his design process, this test can be said to be an all-round burst of the mecha. Since it is said to be a coverage attack, it is naturally not without reason. But if it is just a test, of course there is no need to attack in all directions. It only needs to test the current performance of the mecha. As the limbs of the mecha separated, the 4 separated limbs instantly flew towards the 4 scrapped tanks. With the sound of collisions, something unexpected happened to everyone. The 4 scrapped tanks were actually completely pierced by the limbs of the mecha, and everyone could see clearly from a distance that those tanks were like tofu and could not withstand the attack of the limbs of the mecha. Then the limbs of the mecha flew back, and with a few clicks, they returned to the part of the mecha and automatically completed the assembly. It was not until this time that everyone saw that the front end of the limbs of the mecha had turned into a sharp knife-like existence. Obviously, this transformation began during the flight. On the other side, the chief was already stunned when he saw this scene with a telescope. His mouth opened slightly, and his eyes almost popped out of his eye sockets. Is this what you call full coverage? But the target of this attack is indeed a bit unique. No one can think of this attack method. While speaking, the chief's mouth twitched slightly, and he couldn't help but give a thumbs up to Zihuan and the others. It's just that I didn't expect that this mecha could be automatically separated and assembled. I think it should be the credit of the Dragoon system you mentioned. The chief seemed to be thinking about it. In fact, when the mecha was completed, he had already received the report. Now that he has a little psychological reaction, he came to watch, but hearing is hearing, and seeing is still very shocking. In fact, this full coverage attack has not been fully exerted. Zihuan and Professor Wang shook their heads slightly when they heard this. The chief became interested as soon as he heard it, and looked at the 2 people expectantly, as if he wanted them to explain it quickly. Actually, this is only part of the coverage strike. What has not really been used yet is the mecha's shoulder cannons that just lit up and disappeared, and the laser sword, which can fly out in an instant. In addition, there is a special weapon launcher in the lower part of the mecha's chest, but that weapon uses the mecha's own nuclear energy, which is completely unconverted energy. At this point, the chief immediately understood why it looked so bad. It turned out that the part being tested now was only the most basic part that the mecha could use. If it is really fully used, let alone other things, the nuclear-powered strike alone is equivalent to a nuclear weapon, right? And if this is really fully covered, it seems that it is not without problems for a mecha to destroy a city at once. The more he thought about it, the more he took a breath of cold air, and a deep shock flashed through his heart. Sure enough, the improvement of the mecha this time has directly doubled the combat effectiveness. I really don't know what kind of genius this is who can think of this method. The others also sighed when they heard this. Yes, before Lin Shen appeared, they even had a headache with the exoskeleton armor, but now they have begun to complete the modification of the mecha. But during this period of time, I felt like I was living in a dream. Test rating. This doesn't need to be rated anymore. The mecha can even be directly equipped with nuclear weapons, and the current nuclear weapons are already the most advanced devices in the world. So far, at least no one has been found that can exceed the nuclear strike. The leader shook his head, with a deep sense of helplessness in his eyes. The others also nodded. On the surface, it was used for testing, but in fact it was just to shock everyone. Apart from that, it seemed to have no other use. Okay. Let's go back to the base first. I'll tell you something later. After saying that, he sent a signal to Lin Shen, and Lin Shen controlled the mecha to fly back to the factory. This time, he was really satisfied with the mecha. Although some of the means have not been used, they are all used as top means. Now the mecha has really reached a mature stage. When the 2 men got off the mecha, the others had already been waiting in front. The test results are very satisfactory. This mecha will become the greatest invention in human history. The chief praised it first, but then a bitter expression appeared on his face. Seeing this, everyone was confused again. What's the matter, chief? Why do you have a bitter expression on your face? Seeing this, Zihuan's face suddenly showed a puzzled look. The others also looked over. The chief rolled his eyes. It's not because of the reward. The higher-ups are almost having a headache about this matter. No matter what, there will be at least a demand. But look at this kid. He doesn't have any needs. Even if you ask him, he doesn't need it. Indeed, with this kid's current ability, there is nothing missing. But do you think the higher-ups want to owe these things? As soon as these words came out, everyone's faces showed smiles. Obviously, they have never heard that the country would have a headache about how to reward a person. Logically speaking, when they are in this position, they can give whatever they want as a reward, right? But Lin Shen can even build a mecha. So what else can he reward? If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelist. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We are waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 82. The director is making things up again. Lin Shen, who was standing by, shrugged helplessly when he heard this. Can he be blamed for this? He is not short of money, and he has a girlfriend. What else does he have? Status? No need for that. The higher the position, the more things he has to deal with, and the less time he has to rest. Lin Shen did something he was not happy with. As for the rest, it seems that the superiors can only give him some privileges as rewards. Forget it. Let me think about it. Zealand, you can also tell us if you have any ideas. As long as we can help, we will definitely not be stingy. Just like before, Lin Shen nodded indifferently, but if he really wants to say it, he really hasn't thought of what he wants. If he insists, then just expand the factory a little bit. At the same time, the internet is boiling again. This time, the internet has almost been covered by terms such as nuclear explosions. Many people even posted pictures of mushroom clouds in the distance that they took. Not only the video is popular, but even the major news headlines are scrambling to report this matter. Hey, have you heard about it? There is a suspected nuclear explosion near Bingcheng. I wonder if it's true. Need I say that? It must be true. Some people have even posted pictures. I think it should be true. Countless people have even taken the photos for testing, but no traces of Photoshop have been detected. That should be true. But how could a nuclear explosion occur in the country? Is the war about to start again? It shouldn't be the case, and the international situation seems to be quite calm now. There are no accidents at all. Come on, listen to the nonsense of those guys upstairs. I am from Bingcheng. If there really is a nuclear explosion, we would have been razed to the ground long ago. I think so too. So this thing can't be a nuclear explosion at all. That's right. I don't know what those guys upstairs are thinking. They can say such wild words. The internet has almost been divided into two factions, and countless people have spoken out from their own standpoints. There is no time to even push the heat flow of this matter to another level. But suddenly, everyone found that the video news and other things they saw disappeared in an instant, while the people describing it were still confused. The same situation as last time appeared again. Whether it was the video interface or the TV interface, a scene similar to the news broadcast appeared. In the middle of the video, you can see a middle-aged man with a serious face standing here. Hello everyone, I am the bureau chief. I didn't expect to meet you again after just a while. Although I don't want to, I still feel a little helpless about this matter. Who made you too active on the internet? As he spoke, the bureau chief showed a helpless expression on his face. When everyone heard this, they were slightly stunned and naturally knew why the topic disappeared again in an instant. It is obvious that this kind of thing is the country's action. Otherwise how could it be possible to make the entire network remove these things in an instant? Yes, just like you imagined. This thing is just a rumor. So far, there has never been any form of nuclear attack in our country. The mushroom cloud you saw today was just a mushroom cloud formed by our military testing a small missile nearby in the weather. So please don't worry. You must unconditionally believe in the country and will never let this happen. After the voice fell, the director waved to everyone and then disconnected the connection directly. But everyone who heard this looked at their mobile phones or TVs with idiot eyes. Are you kidding me? Whose small missile can blow up a mushroom cloud? And what kind of weather can there be? The weather in Bingcheng has been sunny recently, okay? There is no extreme weather of any kind, not even a breeze, let alone the weather. Even if you don't explain this sentence later, it is better than explaining it like this. But since the country has come forward to explain that this is just a weapon test, everyone naturally stopped speculating. As long as it is not a nuclear explosion, it will not have any impact on them at all. In addition, since there is a test of new weapons, it naturally means that their country's strength seems to have become stronger. In this way, is it still far from the world's first? Of course, it is not far away. So after the heat flow was removed, everyone just talked about it and then returned to their normal life. On the other side, Almost everyone in the factory had left. With the completion of the mecha, everyone needs a period of rest. Even Zihuan and Professor Wang, who are so stubborn about the experiment, accepted this vacation. Such a long period of tense spirit is naturally a high-intensity work for them. In addition, the two are old, so of course they can't continue to work so hard. The leader naturally left the Ice City with the test results and video report this time. On the other side, the top leaders of China were meeting at this time. However, the purpose of the meeting was not because of the ability test of the mecha. The bigwigs present had already watched the test of the technical school. Although the camera was happy, it was silent about it. Obviously, the mecha was a secret and it was obviously not easy to talk about it. What they are discussing now is the issue of the Arab oil power coming to buy. What they need to buy is the tank known as the King of the Land. What do you think of this deal? After the person sitting in the first seat spoke, the others all shook their heads. It is said that the area of the Arab oil power seems to be a little uneasy recently. It is said that new oil deposits have appeared, and several small countries nearby have fallen out because of this. The Arabs bought the tanks because of that battle. I just don't understand why they didn't choose the world's #1 power, the Eagle Sauce, but chose us. Does this need to be said? It must be those greedy guys who intervened, and the prices they offered were all unacceptable to the Arabs. That's true, but if you really say it, this seems to be a good opportunity to hit the Eagle Sauce hard. The premise is that we have to take out the first tank. After these words, everyone was silent again. Chapter 83. Let Lin Shen improve the tank. They have the most advanced tanks, and more than one. Whether it is the 99G main battle tank or the TZT-999 main battle tank, they are both among the top models in my country's tanks. However, for the Eagle Sauce, these two types seem to be almost the same and cannot be separated from each other. This is one of the headaches for the senior executives. But this is a good opportunity, and I believe everyone doesn't want to miss it. Suddenly, another senior executive looked up, and this person was the chief who had just left Ice City not long ago. It is indeed a rare opportunity. In this case, let the Arab powers choose these two tanks, whichever one they like. We will sell it to them. There is no limit on the quantity. The person sitting in the first seat flickered slightly, and then patted the table lightly and said. Hearing this, everyone present took a breath of cold air. The person who just spoke was the one who had the final say among them. To be honest, China still has the courage to sell its latest models of tanks to other countries. Let's not talk about the present. Their strength was not that simple before, and their main combat power was not in the tank unit. Not to mention now, with the Iron Man armor, full-body exoskeleton armor, and even mecha. And the Iron Man armor has already started mass production, and dozens of sets have already been shipped. So tanks have become the most insignificant existence for them in China. Actually, I feel it's not enough. At this time, the previous leader spoke again, attracting everyone's attention. Everyone else frowned slightly, especially the old one sitting in the first seat. The limit we can accept is only these two types of top tanks. If it's other technologies, I think this cooperation should not be negotiated. Obviously firm words sounded, but the leader smiled and shook his head. It's not about other technologies. I'm talking about tanks as well, but I want to let Lin Shen see if he can modify the tanks. After all, this guy can even make mechas, so modifying a tank shouldn't be a big problem. If it doesn't work, just use the materials of mechas to assemble a few tanks. At this point, the atmosphere in the entire conference room was a little solemn, and the others were stunned, and finally their eyes gradually became sharp. Yes, why didn't they think of this? As for doubts, there is no such thing. What are you doubting? What is there to doubt? As the leader said, Lin Shen can even make things like Iron Man armor and mechas. What's wrong with modifying a tank? Not to mention that there is a worst-case scenario, right? Very good, then I'll leave this to you. As for that little guy, you owe him a favor first. Anyway, you've already owed him a lot, so you're not afraid of a little more. Hearing this, Lao Yi waved his hand and agreed to such a decision. The others also nodded, and then their faces showed helplessness. To be honest, they have already paid back the favors they owe, but there is another way to express their views. But now, It seems that it has not reached that point yet, so let's talk about it after a while. The chief nodded, then stood up and left the meeting room. On the other side, Lin Shen and Ling Xun had already returned home. Recently, Ling Xun's parents are still going further and further on the road of opening their own store, but in just over a month, they have also made some progress. So Ling Xun and her brother are still living in the Lin family, but Lin's father and mother did not mind it at all, but were very happy. Since Lin Shen went to school, the whole family has become much quieter. Apart from the two of them, only Aunt Chu is still there. This time, there is another child, which can make the two of them a little happier. Mom and Dad, I'm back. What delicious food are you going to eat tonight? I smelled the fragrance before I even entered the door. Lin Shen took Ling Xun's hand and went straight home, shouting at the top of his voice. Lin's father and mother, who were sitting in the living room, raised their heads and rolled their eyes. Come and sit down, brat. What's the big deal about yelling at the door? Don't think that just because you have achieved something now, your father, can't control you. Father Lin didn't give him any good face at all, and Lin Shen was helpless. Ling Xun covered his mouth and chuckled, and took the opportunity to pull Lin Shen to sit on the sofa. Boy, have you come up with something new recently? Now our partners have changed from the entire Bing City to the entire Heilong province. Even the higher-ups are asking us to develop towards the whole country. Such obvious support, and just our family, must have something to do with you. Although Father Lin looked at Lin Shen seriously, his eyes were filled with satisfaction. If they were just allowed to come by themselves, it would be enough to make their family worry-free for the rest of their lives. At most, they could develop and spread to several nearby cities, but they definitely couldn't achieve the current scale. In just less than 2 months, the scale of their company has even tripled compared to before. Lin's father and mother even controlled all the shares and did not give up any of them. This kind of thing was something they could not imagine before. It's nothing, just a new thing. Anyway, it's all scientific research stuff. Let's not talk about this for now. What are we going to eat tonight? I'm hungry, just got back. Lin Shen pulled the corner of his mouth and changed the subject directly. It must be said that the higher-ups have thought of every aspect to compensate him. Since he doesn't need anything, then start directly with his parents. Is there any problem with this direct support of the company? Absolutely no problem. But these things have nothing to do with him. Let the two old men worry about it. Anyway, they are still young now, and if the company is bigger, they will naturally be busy. Chapter 84, Going to meet the in-laws. So soon, Lin Shen's father and mother did not pursue Lin Shen's change of subject. Sitting in their position, they naturally knew that there were some things that ordinary people could not know, so they just mentioned it casually. However, the better their son is, the more proud they are. Lin Shen can even be said to be the only one in history who graduated from Harbin Institute of Technology early and even got a diploma. And he only studied for 1 year. Who knows the value of this? After sitting for a while, Aunt Chu brought up the prepared meals. In the end, the whole family gathered around the table, and Aunt Chu looked at Lin Shen with satisfaction. She has worked in the Lin family for more than 10 years, and it can almost be said that she watched Lin Shen grow up. Naturally, she is very proud of this. By the way, don't run around tomorrow. Come with us to the dinner party. At the dinner table, Father Lin gave him a piece of meat and then spoke. I won't go. What kind of dinner party would you take me to? Anyway, I'm not taking over the family company now. I'll just eat and drink if I go to those dinner parties. Lin Shen refused without hesitation and stuffed the piece of braised pork in the bowl into his mouth. Are you sure you don't want to go? This time, even Lin's mother looked at him with a half-smile. Lin Shen shook his head without hesitation without raising his head. If you say you don't want to go, then don't go. I finally have a day off tomorrow and I want to sleep in, Lin Shen said as he added another large chopstick of food to Ling Xun's bowl. Well, I thought that you two kids have grown up and should meet your in-laws for dinner. Now it seems that if you don't want to go, forget it. I'll call your in-laws later. When Lin's father said this, he glanced at Lin Shen vaguely. Lin Shen, who was eating a lot of rice, almost spit it out. After swallowing the food in his mouth with great difficulty, he looked up at his parents in shock. What did they just talk about? In-laws. He hasn't even met Ling Xun's parents yet, So why did his parents come directly to him? And from the looks of it, it seems that the two sides are still in contact. Who can tell him what's going on? Thinking of this, Lin Shen subconsciously turned around and looked at Lin Shen, who was naturally confused about this matter. Facing Lin Shen's gaze, she shook her head blankly, but then lowered her head embarrassedly. She didn't expect that he would bring up such a thing. They only knew each other in college and have been dating for only a year. It just seems to be a good match. But how come it has become the stage of discussing marriage in the blink of an eye? Although it's not yet time to discuss marriage, how can you meet both parents like this? Wait, why don't you tell me what's going on first? Lin Shen looked at his parents helplessly. Why are there so many things going on? The child has been living at our place recently, so of course we need to have a contact to feel at ease. How dare you let your child live in a stranger's house for no reason? Mother Lin glanced at her brother Lin Shen, who was sitting next to her and eating quietly. Lin Shen suddenly realized, the little guy is already in kindergarten, so it is no problem to remember the above phone number. So father and mother Lin started with this, but now looking at what they are talking about, it seems that they are doing well. After all, they are preparing to meet. Then this is a bit too early. We are just freshmen at our age, at most just sophomores. Lin Shen was interrupted in the middle of his speech. Okay, you better stop talking. What's wrong with being a freshman or sophomore? You're still over 20 years old. When I was your age, I would have been engaged to your mother. If you hadn't been dating someone, I would have wanted to find a partner for you to marry. Just be content. Lin Shen's father's words almost choked Lin Shen on his saliva, and his mouth twitched. Then he nodded helplessly. Since both of them had said so, what else could he do? That's right. Anyway, I think you two are quite suitable. We are very satisfied with your talent and beauty. If possible, let's get your business done as soon as possible. Lin's mother's words made Lin Shen, who was already blushing, blush even more. After a meal, the two ran back to their respective rooms as if they were fleeing in panic. However, just after returning to the room, Lin Shen received a call. After the call was picked up, the voice from the head rang. Lin, I have something to ask you. I wonder if you are free. Listening to the voice on the other end of the phone, Lin Shen spoke slowly. Master, please tell me. I will do my best to help you if I can. It's like this. I need to trade a batch of advanced tanks with the Arab oil giant, but I want you to try to make a batch of more advanced tanks. If you can't, it's okay to modify the original parts. Listening to the voice of the master, Lin Shen's eyes flashed slightly, and then he had an idea in his mind. For him, nothing is impossible. Not to mention that he actually has a plan in his mind. Recently, he has been fascinated by a game called Cyberpunk, which happens to have a very sci-fi thing in it. Wouldn't that kind of cyber tank completely meet the master's requirements? No problem. I may not be free tomorrow. I have something to deal with. Wait until the day after tomorrow. The day after tomorrow I will go to the factory and let everyone follow me to do it. As soon as Lin Shen finished speaking, the other end of the phone became excited. What's the matter? Can I help you? Hearing the voice on the other end of the phone, Lin Shen's mouth twitched. He was going to meet his mother-in-law. How could they help him? No, I'm going with my parents to meet my girlfriend's parents. Wait until the day after tomorrow. I'll go to the factory to make arrangements the day after tomorrow. After Lin Shen finished speaking, there was no sound from the chief. He really couldn't help with this matter, but his eyes lit up again when he thought of this. Has Lin Shen already developed to the point where he has to meet his parents? Doesn't that mean they will get married in a while? Maybe they can make a scene by then. It just so happens that they owe so many favors, so now they can help a little in this regard. While thinking about this in his heart, the chief's mood began to become cheerful. Okay, then I won't bother you for now. There is still about a month, so there is no need to rush. Chapter 85. Don't study anymore. I've got the blueprints ready. After hanging up the phone, Lin Shen got up from the bed and sat in front of the computer. He drew the blueprint that he had come up with. After all, he didn't have much time tomorrow. Who knows when the two parents would meet? He would go to the factory the day after tomorrow, so he didn't have time to deal with the blueprints. So he had to work hard today. Fortunately, this was just the blueprint of the cyber tank, which was much simpler than the blueprint of the mecha. It was completed in just over an hour. The next day, Lin Shen, his parents, took Lin Shen and her brother to a high-end restaurant that had been reserved long ago. Lin Shen's parents happened to have just arrived, so the two families chatted happily. Since they were in the entrepreneurial period recently, Lin Shen's parents were very interested in this topic. It happened that Lin Shen's parents had several companies under their control, so the two families soon talked together. They even threw the two of them aside and ignored them. Seeing that they were chatting so enthusiastically, Lin Shen had no choice but to order the dishes first, otherwise, I'm afraid they wouldn't be able to eat after lunchtime. It was not until the food was served that the parents of both sides stopped talking reluctantly. Then, while eating, they turned the topic to Lin Shen and the others. However, after just a short chat, Lin Shen's parents suddenly recognized Lin Shen. They remembered seeing Lin Shen's photo on TV when the controlled nuclear fusion project was announced, so they were also shocked. In this way, Lin Shen not only has a prominent family background, but also has academic achievements. Even controlled nuclear fusion was researched by him, so what is there to be dissatisfied with? So the eyes that looked over were almost full of appreciation and relief. As for Lin Shen's parents, of course, they didn't have any opinions about Lin Shen. They didn't care what kind of girlfriend their son chose, and basically didn't discipline him much. As long as the character is good and the three views are correct, it's fine. Others don't matter. Moreover, their family is rich. Even if their children are not promising, the money is enough for them to live for a lifetime. Not to mention that Lin Shen himself is also a college bully, and his character and three views are naturally impeccable. So the two families hit it off and started discussing the steps of engagement. Lin Shen felt numb when he heard this, and Lin Shen lowered his head in shame. Finally, the time was agreed upon, and the wedding would be held in 2 months. That's right, it's not an engagement, but a wedding. Lin Shen was just stunned for a moment. The two parties were originally discussing the engagement banquet, but suddenly jumped to the wedding. It was so fast that he couldn't react yet. The parents of both parties hit it off and finalized it directly. Lin Shen looked at his parents in a daze, as if he felt like he was being sold, but they were naturally happy. Anyway, now that they were in love, they might as well get things done quickly. After lunch, Lin Shen, Lin Shen and her brother left first. As for the parents of both parties, they naturally had to discuss their work problems. Lin Shen didn't care about that anyway. Please give me more advice in the future, wife. On the way back, Lin Shen looked at Lin Shen with a smile. Lin Shen's pretty face turned red and he spat lightly. What are you talking about? There are still 2 months left. It's still early. She couldn't help but feel shy. When they first started dating, they had already communicated openly and frankly. They planned to meet each other's parents when they graduated, but now they have indeed graduated, but they only went to college for 1 year. They were approved to graduate early, from the original 4 years. It was directly shortened to 1 year. Anyone would be a little unprepared. It's a matter of time anyway. 2 months have passed in a flash. Why don't you just go and get the certificate today? And I just happened to see that your uncle and aunt seemed to have given you a small book. Lin Shen looked at Lin Shen with a playful smile, and his eyes glanced at the other's pocket. Lin Shen's already blushing face became even redder, but after a slight hesitation, he still nodded slightly. Her parents did ask them to do this in advance, and it would only be a ceremony later. What's more, Lin Shen also told her that there would be new tasks later, so they should still be in a hurry. Then there was no time to delay on this matter, so the two of them went directly to the Civil Affairs Bureau in the afternoon. When they walked out of the Civil Affairs Bureau, they both looked at the small red book in their hands and felt that it was a little unreal. Now it's legal. Lin Shen laughed evilly, indirectly and blatantly took Lin Shen's hand and walked towards home. Soon, a day passed quietly. Lin Shen had already brought his drawings to the factory. The others were already waiting here. They did not continue to study the mecha project, but looked at Lin Shen with expectation. What are you doing? Why are you so idle today? Lin Shen smiled and looked at everyone, lifting the plastic bag in his hand. You kids are still keeping us in suspense. We all know what the chief wants to talk to you about. Now I come to discuss with you about the tank. If this kind of thing needs to be improved, It is not a trivial matter, and there is only 1 month. At this point, Zihuan frowned slightly with some worry. The others also sighed. They really didn't expect that the requirements for this matter were so strict. If they were given half a year, it would be fine. It would be no problem to improve the tank through the principles of Mecha and Iron Man armor. But what can they do in a month? They can't do anything. It would be a lie to say that they are not worried. Come on, what's there to discuss? I have already drawn the blueprints. If you can't figure it out in a month, is it a big problem to build a tank? Lin Shen said, and took out the USB flash drive and threw it directly to Zihuan. Zihuan was slightly stunned when he heard this, and then he saw the USB flash drive flying towards him, so he caught it in a hurry. What kind of monster are you, kid? Don't tell me you have some knowledge of tanks. Are you going to let the rest of us live? Zihuan's face turned completely dark, and the others nodded with deep feelings. Even one by one, there was an indignant look in their eyes. It seemed that they were accusing why the gap between people was so big. Chapter 86 Zihuan of Ashwood. But no matter what, Lin Shen could even research mechas, so improving tanks was not a shocking thing. After a moment of silence, everyone could only let it go. Okay, stop making that expression, just do what you need to do. Times have really changed, and it's time for you young people to do it in the future. Professor Wang shook his head helplessly. To be honest, he was more confused than others about a student like himself. It was obvious that his previous study status was not good at all, and he even seemed to be just messing around. But since the final exams began, Lin Shen seemed to have changed into a different person, with all kinds of surprises and shocks emerging one after another. Now, he has been directly listed as a national treasure. Let's not talk about other things. Just for these current research, if he were to be awarded an award, I'm afraid the medals would be hung from his chest to his calves. Yes, it's that exaggerated. After all, mechas, Iron Man armor, etc., represent more than just these two things. There are even more aspects. For example, materials, weapons, various structures, etc. Any of them would be shocking, and might even help a certain scientific breakthrough to a deeper level of research. This is a completely different existence. But just before everyone left, Zhu Wei noticed what Lin Shen was holding. What are you holding? As soon as he said this, everyone looked over. This was the first time that Lin Shen came to the factory with a package. Could it be something strange? Everyone else looked over with strange eyes, and then Lin Shen remembered something. By the way, I'm getting married in 2 months. I came here today to send wedding invitations to everyone. When you are free, let's have a drink together, Lin Shen said, and he reached out and took out a stack of invitations from the plastic bag and handed them to everyone. The others were stunned when they heard this, and they all seemed to have not recovered yet. Zhu Wei even opened his mouth and stood there in a daze. Getting married? You and Ling Zhen are getting married? After a long silence, Zhu Wei finally spoke loudly. His voice even changed a little because of surprise. The others immediately realized that Lin Shen's girlfriend had always been by their side. They were just surprised by the news that Lin Shen was suddenly getting married. Yes, my parents and Zhugzhen's parents met yesterday. They originally wanted to discuss the engagement banquet, but I don't know how it suddenly became a wedding. Since they have already decided, there is no point in me saying anything. Besides, you are old enough anyway, so it seems that there is nothing wrong. Lin Shen smiled, and everyone rolled their eyes. Only Ling Zhen lowered his head shyly in the crowd, and never said anything. Okay, you kid, you are not satisfied with having such a beautiful wife. Anyway, just wait for me to come over and eat and drink for free. Giving a red envelope is impossible. Zhu Wei patted Lin Shen's shoulder fiercely and said viciously, why is it that his brother, who grew up with him, is about to get married while he doesn't even have a partner? This is not just a crush in terms of knowledge, but also in other aspects. This feeling is really unpleasant. It's okay, this young master doesn't need your money, just come and eat. I want to see how much you can eat. Lin Shen waved his hand and didn't care at all. The others also became active at this time, and they all said that they would definitely come to drink a glass of wedding wine. As for Zihuan and Professor Wang, they were naturally among them. After playing around for a while, Everyone has begun to immerse themselves in research, and the first thing to study is naturally the cyber tank drawings brought by Lin Shen. After reading them in detail, the originally slightly lively atmosphere fell into a dead silence again. Everyone stared at the drawings in their hands in silence. It's not that they don't understand these, but they think the design of the drawings is really sci-fi, even more sci-fi than mecha. What are these? Cyber tanks. Isn't that something that only exists in science fiction movies? You can't design normal things at all. You can only design those sci-fi things, right? But what made them speechless was that the principles of these designs seemed to have no problems at all. Zihuan wanted to try to verify it through formulas, but there was no way for him to find fault with this little problem. I really admire you. You don't give us old guys any chance. Forget it. Forget it. I don't want to use my brain anymore. I'll just leave these things to you in the future. Zihuan put down the printed drawings in his hand, found a chair and sat down, and started to mess around. Everyone who saw this scene chuckled. Obviously, they also knew what kind of personality their teacher had. Although he said he was messing around, he was actually crazier than anyone else when it came to research, so they didn't take it seriously at all. Sure enough, when Lin Shen was about to lead everyone to start making cyber tanks, Zihuan stood up again with full blood, and began to complete his part with great interest. Cyber tanks and other things are also one of the few things that Lin Shen did not explain the principles of, because the structure of the cyber tank is almost the same as that of a normal tank. It's just that the tracks, chassis, and weapons have been greatly improved. Other than that, it's basically a normal tank. For academicians who specialize in mechanical research, as long as there are drawings in front of them, developing a tank is not a problem at all. Not to mention manufacturing it according to the drawings. And in terms of the weapons of the cyber tank, there are actually some similarities with the mecha. It's just that the gap between them is still a little bit. This slight gap is not a big deal at all, so the manufacturing started quickly. During this period, the leader also came once, and at the same time, he learned that Lin Shen was going to get married. So he naturally said that he would definitely come at that time. Even Leader Li didn't know where he got the news from and came here specially, and by the way, he also said that he would bring some old friends. But Lin Shen suddenly began to worry, because they are all high-level figures in the country. If they really come all at once, it will cause a huge shock. Chapter 87 Cyber Tank is completed and ready for testing. But even though he was worried, he certainly couldn't stop those people from coming. So we can only wait and see. Now let's finish the task at hand first. Anyway, this cyber tank is too simple for Lin Shen, who built a mecha alone. Even other researchers, after studying the drawings of the tank, are ready to start making it. Compared with the mecha, the difficulty of this thing is simply a level lower. However, this cyber tank still has its merits. For example, the title of the king of the land, the tank, is brought into full play. If the cyber tank is really developed, then the role it can play on the ground will definitely be much greater than that of the mecha. In a blink of an eye, a week has passed. During this week, everyone worked overtime until late at night every day, rushing to make it. Finally, on the 7th day, as the mechanical arm began to operate continuously, the cyber tank was completed. At this moment, what appeared in front of everyone was a sci-fi style tank. This tank is not set off by the usual military green color. It even looks like it is made of crystal, full of a different sense of technology. At the same time, the tank's tracks have been replaced by the oval running track of the cyber tank. In fact, this is an upgraded version of the track. It has a very strong density and crushing force, and can produce different grooves to adapt to various terrains as it runs. In addition, it can even change the appearance of this new track through internal manipulation. The upper part, which was originally almost the same size as the track below, has been completely reduced. Even from the surface, it is doubtful whether it can accommodate a person. In front of the cyber tank, where the gun barrel should be, the length of the gun barrel is relatively small. It is even more doubtful whether it can fire powerful shells. Finally completed. Is this thing the cyber tank on the drawing? Why does it feel a little different from what I imagined? It feels flashy and unrealistic. Looking at the cyber tank that appeared in front of him, Zihuan was amazed and showed a helpless expression on his face. The others nodded subconsciously, and it was obvious that they had the same idea. After all, a tank must give people enough pressure, but this cyber tank did not give people any pressure. Could it be that it looked like a toy? In addition to the crystal clear surface, there were no other outstanding highlights. Don't worry, wait for the leader to come and try it, won't you know? But if this tank really needs to be tested, it can't be nearby. I'm afraid that the power will flatten the area. Lin Shen was naturally confident in the tank he had developed, and he had a reference template for this thing, so of course there would be no accidents. But how to say this appearance? It is indeed very confusing. Hearing this, Zihuan nodded. What they said was also speculation. Wouldn't they know what the real power is after testing it? If the tested power is really explosive, then others will never think of it. After all, they themselves felt that this tank had no threat at all. Wouldn't it be more confusing to others? If this were to happen on the battlefield, the effect would be absolutely shocking. It is not certain that it would even produce an explosive effect. After notifying the chief immediately prepared to fly over on a special plane. He originally thought that he would wait for nearly a month to see what the research results were. He did not even have much expectation in his heart. After all, a person's energy is limited no matter how much. It is extremely rare to be able to study one thing and reach the peak of its research. How could there be time to study more? Lin Shen is also a human being, but human power is always limited, isn't it? He even thought of what kind of reason he should use to comfort Lin Shen and others. But it has only been a week, and he was told that the new tank has been developed. What is going on? Is he dreaming? How is this possible? If it were any academician level existence, it would be difficult for them to transform other tanks on the original tanks, not to mention researching a new tank. This is completely ridiculous. If someone else called to tell him such a news, he would probably feel sneering or even not want to pay attention to it at all. But the person who said this was Lin Shen, who developed the mecha. The chief dared not be careless about this person who was defined as a national heavy weapon. After throwing the things in his hand to the assistant to deal with, he rushed over on a special plane without stopping. For 2 hours, he was on the plane guessing how this was done. When he finally arrived at the gate of the factory, he found that there was really a tank that looked like a toy, slowly driving out of it. "Chief, you are here. Come and take a look at our latest work. How handsome it is." Beside the tank, Zihuan was walking with the tank and said with a beaming face. The rest of the people pretended to cover their faces. Who just said that this tank looked a bit like a toy? Now he started to brag about how handsome this tank is. Isn't this obviously two-faced? However, people who have long been accustomed to this kind of thing shook their heads and ignored it directly. This appearance looks quite strange. The chief's mouth twitched slightly, and then he used a fair evaluation word. The others wanted to laugh but didn't dare to. After all, when they saw the tank just now, they all had almost the same expression. Whose tank looks like this? Maybe when it comes to the battlefield, it may be a problem whether it can hurt the enemy. Let's not talk about that for now. Let's find a place to test it. The power of this tank is absolutely no problem. The appearance is just an illusion. Professor Wang on the side made an appropriate round of the situation, and everyone nodded when they heard this. After all, the most important thing is performance. And it doesn't matter what the appearance looks like, as long as it is easy to use. Who cares what it looks like? Even the funnier the better. The effect of confusing the enemy is directly maximized. Isn't this more reassuring than applying a layer of camouflage on the outside? Chapter 88, Tank Racing. Lin Shen drove the cyber tank, and the others got in the car, and they slowly drove away. According to the requirements, this test will be conducted in a deserted place. If it is closer, the director may need to come forward, and it may even have a huge impact on the entire city. After driving for more than an hour, everyone finally stopped in a deserted area. There are some small deep pits nearby, and there is even a small hill not far away. There are some scrapped steel and stone nearby. It doesn't look like a wilderness, but rather a deserted test site. This is the test site where the base was located before the ice city was built. It's just that it was built inside the base later, and the test site was directly moved there. It just happens that this place is a distance away from the ice city. No matter how loud the noise is, as long as it doesn't create another mushroom cloud. Basically no one can see it. The leader looked at this place in the distance, with a deep sense of nostalgia in his eyes. The others nodded one after another. No wonder they thought this place should be a test site. It turned out to be the case. This is indeed a test site, and it is a tank test site, because those small grooves are not something that armored vehicles can drive through. Do you want to come in and experience it yourself? Lin Shen opened the cover from the cyber tank and looked at everyone with a smile. Compared with the mecha, the cyber tank is not so exciting, so Lin Shen doesn't really want to experience it inside. Instead, he wants to see the situation outside. However, Zhu Wei, who had no chance to experience it before, certainly would not miss such a good opportunity, so he immediately raised his hand to say that he wanted to try it. On the other side, Zihuan was also excited to go in and experience the internal situation. As for the others, they all shook their heads. Not to mention the chief. First, he is a little old, and second, as a tester, he must see the data of the tank accurately from outside and make a fair judgment. So, including the driver, a total of 3 people went directly into the tank. Although the cyber tank this time did not have the advanced Dragoon system like the mecha, it could still intelligently connect to the tablet outside. At the moment the screen was connected, people like this could see the sci-fi style inside the cyber tank. In addition to Lin Shen sitting in the driver's seat, there were 4 seats in the back, just like a van. I can't believe it. This thing looks small, but the space inside is so wide. Could it be that the things like tracks below can also be vacated and used as space? The chief looked at the video of Unicorn, and his eyes showed a little surprise. You know, the normal capacity of a tank is only about 2 to 3 people at most. But this cyber tank, which looks smaller, can accommodate 5 people, and this is just the seats. If someone can squat on the side, it can even accommodate 2 to 3 more people. This is definitely a lethal weapon on the battlefield. Just for this point, the chief can give it a top score. In addition to this, the interior of the tank is also very sci-fi style. The display screen inside is similar to the operating screen of the mecha. Even some buttons have a little camouflage color. Any science fiction fan would not be able to escape such an operating space. Start the test. Let me see how this tank performs. After the chief praised it slightly, he gave instructions. As the operator, Lin Shen nodded and started to operate. The operation method of the cyber tank is almost the same as that of a normal tank. The only difference is some of the buttons. However, there are various markings on these buttons. Anyone who can drive a tank can basically operate it after seeing this scene. After a series of operations, the tank quickly started to move forward. The speed at the beginning was okay, still within the normal speed, but in just a few seconds, the tank rushed out like a speeding car. The speed was almost about 100 miles per hour. Zhu Wei and Zihuan, who were sitting inside the tank, suddenly felt a push on their backs, and saw that the outside of the operating screen had begun to become blurred. Fortunately, this operating area is relatively large, and the tank still did not drive out instantly even at such a speed. As for the gullies ahead, the tank naturally couldn't get through them. At this terrifying speed, the gullies could almost be ignored. The production staff, led by Go Zian, stood by and watched all this in amazement. They knew that the performance of the cyber tank should be much better than expected, but they didn't expect it to be this good. This is not driving a tank, it's obviously flying too low, otherwise the tank would really take off. The chief twitched his mouth helplessly. In fact, he had already prepared himself mentally. Generally, the things produced by Lin Shen are basically fine products. So the cyber tank is no exception. But no matter how well he prepared himself mentally, he never thought that he would use drag racing to describe a tank at the same time. Others drive tanks off-road, but you are drag racing with a tank? In just 2 minutes, Lin Shen had driven the tank back from the test site at lightning speed. The chief was speechless when he saw this scene, and reluctantly gave it an S on the performance rating. This is already the top rating among tanks, but if he really wants to say it, it should be rated as science fiction. After all, whose tank can achieve such a level? Lin, why don't you try to operate it again? Although this tank is very fast, its off-road function is not reflected at all. And the most important thing about a tank should be its off-road performance. so this part still needs to be tested in a little more detail. After thinking for a while, the chief continued to speak. Lin Shen, who was sitting inside the tank and operating it, nodded slightly. He also felt that this was right, so he drove the tank back to the first gully. This time he did not start racing, but prepared to pass this gully at the speed of a normal tank. In this way, the performance of the tank can be reflected. Everyone also opened their eyes wide and waited to see the effect of the tracks. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelist. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 89. No need to research drilling machines. Under everyone's expectant gaze, the track that was originally close to the groove actually fell directly. However, the track stuck in the groove did not seem to stop. Instead, it seemed to support the weight of the entire tank. At the moment of supporting it, it shrank back to its original shape. There are many more grooves in front, and each time it passes through a groove, the track will undergo different changes, according to the depth of the groove, even the area of the groove and the softness of the ground. The surface changes occur. For this scene, everyone who had been mentally prepared was stunned, not to mention the leader who had never known anything about it. At this time, he was already shocked and didn't know what to say. How does it feel to sit in it? Are there any bumps or anything like that? After a moment of silence, the leader finally reacted and asked the intercom. There is no bump at all. It feels like the tank is driving on flat ground. Zihuan's voice came from the intercom, and the fact was just as he said. The tank as a whole didn't even have too many bumps, let alone other violent shaking. That was completely non-existent. This thing is an all-terrain tank. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. How come no one has ever thought of this kind of deformation measure on a tank before? This is the real king of the land. Listening to the report from the tablet, the leader's face became more and more emotional. Even his expression became visibly excited. But this is not over yet. After a while, the tank has arrived at the edge of a small hill in front. However, the speed of the tank did not decrease, but it even increased a little. The leader looked at it and his eyes widened. What is this? Do you want to use this method to test the tank's ability to withstand attacks? However, in this case, the driver can be outside. Isn't it a bit too presumptuous to be inside? If there is any deviation, the damage will not be just this little bit. But what he didn't expect was that the existence in front of the tank that looked like a gun barrel actually began to change after shrinking. At the moment when it was folded to the side, the leader felt that his brain shrank slightly. But the next second, he saw that something on the other side of the gun barrel also turned out. It turned out to be a giant drill. The moment the drill touched the surface of the soil, it began to rotate violently. With a rumbling sound, the tank actually drilled directly into the mountain. At this moment, the atmosphere had completely turned into a dead silence. Even Professor Wang and his colleagues who participated in the production twitched their mouths slightly when they saw this scene. What's with your expression? Don't you know the function of this drill? The leader looked at the others and immediately showed a puzzled look, and even the shock in his heart was suppressed a little. I know, this thing is also made of new materials, but we originally thought that it was just placed in the tank as a backup device. But I didn't expect it to be installed directly, because the weapon aspect is not our responsibility. This has always been studied by Lin Shen alone, so we haven't had time to take a closer look at what's going on, Professor Wang explained with a little helplessness, and the leader nodded slightly. It was indeed something that Lin Shen could do. It's called a tank, but even the template of the drill has been copied into it. In addition, it can adapt to all terrains, not to mention that 5 people can sit in the tank. Even if the attack capability of such a tank is not outstanding, it is still countless times better than their current tanks. As for the attack capability, they don't ask for too much. As long as it can be comparable to ordinary tanks, they will spend money to buy some new tank-specific shells. It's not impossible. But why is the sound gone now? Where did the tank go? After waiting for a while, the leader suddenly found something wrong. He raised his head and spoke with a puzzled look. Professor Wang came to his side, took the tablet and manipulated it slightly. Then the picture on the tablet began to rotate. Half of the screen became the current situation inside the tank, and the other half of the screen became a plane diagram of the tank from the ground. When they saw this plane diagram, they were stunned, because in just 3 minutes, the tank actually penetrated the mountain and drilled directly down hundreds of meters. At present, the tank is about 100 meters underground and continues to move at a speed of 30 miles. And from this point of view, this should not be the limit of the tank. The chief was so excited that he didn't know what to say. Even Professor Wang, one of the makers, took a deep breath. Drilling 100 meters in 3 minutes. Even the most advanced drilling machine in our country can't do this. This guy didn't build a tank, he built a drilling machine. Professor Wang's eyes were a little scattered. He never thought that the tank made by his hands would become a drilling machine in the blink of an eye. The chief was also pinching his philtrum. Come on, this kid is really capable of doing things. No matter what passes through his hands, it can always bring some scares to us old guys. Next time, don't have too high expectations for this little guy, otherwise he will be scared to death sooner or later. Shaking his head helplessly, the chief had a strong bitter smile on his face. He thought that after the previous mecha incident, his psychological endurance should have become much stronger, but at present, it seems that there is not much difference, especially seeing things that could never appear in his world appear in front of him one after another. It was like living in a dream. Let this guy come up. It seems that we don't need to study the drill anymore, just follow the drill template used by this guy. Shaking his head, the leader spoke to the tablet. Not long after he finished speaking, the rumbling sound that had disappeared appeared again. Not far from the hill, another pit with a diameter of more than 2 meters appeared, and the cyber tank slowly released from it. Then the whole cyber tank began to tremble slightly, and the soil that was originally attached to the shell fell to the ground in the vibration. The tank itself has returned to its brand new appearance. Chapter 90, Let you test your power. You comb your hair in the middle of the mountain top? It seems that this thing has an automatic cleaning function. After the chief's mouth twitched again, his face finally returned to calm. Let's start the weapon test next. I don't need to say anything about the performance of the tank. Anyone who comes here should give it a full score. But the power test next is the more important key to the tank. After the chief's words fell, everyone nodded. This is indeed the truth. The reason why the tank is called the King of the Land is naturally because of its terrifying land combat ability. It is far from enough to be able to face harsh terrain and always walk on flat ground. It also needs to have absolute power. Otherwise, it is just a bunch of moving iron brothers, which can't play any role against the enemy at all. What kind of King of the Land is it? Hearing the order, Lin Shen's tank, which he had already driven, returned to the front of everyone. The original drill had returned to the side of the tank and retracted into it, and the small gun barrel appeared again. Please push it a little further, at least 100 meters away, otherwise I'm afraid I'll be hurt by mistake. Lin Shen's voice came from the tablet, and everyone's faces turned cold when they heard this. Then they retreated to the back without hesitation. Obviously, for them, Lin Shen's other functions might be a little unreliable. It would bring them some inexplicable surprises, but when it comes to power, it can be said that it is impeccable. Lin Shen is like the king of war, especially the previous mecha, which has long been changed into a war machine. It can even destroy a city by itself, and it's easy. This time, the tank is very likely to move towards the direction of the mecha. When everyone obediently came to 100 meters away, they all looked in the direction of the cyber tank with expectation. They also want to see what the tank's attack means are. If it can really get close to the mecha, it must be a situation of destroying the world. Apart from this, they can't think of any other situation. As everyone's eyes turned over, the cyber tank's seemingly toy-like gun barrel had already burst into dazzling and terrifying electric light. The azure light flashed across everyone's retinas like thunder. Almost instantly, a very terrifying electric light flew directly towards the direction of the small hill in the distance. Boom! With a terrifying vibration, countless people's bodies were shaking slightly, and they were almost unable to bear it. For them, this seemed to be no different from an earthquake. And the vibration stopped after just over 10 seconds. When the vibration stopped, Everyone subconsciously looked in the direction of the small hill, but the moment they looked over, their bodies were already stiff in place. Countless cold sweats began to emerge on their backs, and everyone felt their scalps numb, as if something had exploded instantly. I saw that the place where the small hill was located was actually directly divided into two halves. The top seemed to have been combed in the middle, and there was no distance at all. The vacant area was the result of the tank driven by Lin Shen firing a shot. At this moment, countless white smoke was still rising from the top of the mountain, which showed how terrifying the power of this shot was. What is this? For a moment, the chief felt that he was not speaking properly. Even when he watched the previous mecha test, the shock in his heart was not as strong as it is now. After all, it was a mecha before, and it was natural to cause large-scale casualties. After all, the mecha itself is something in science fiction movies. Even if something happens, it is not surprising. But this is just a tank, although it looks a bit like a sci-fi style cyber tank. But isn't it a bit too exaggerated for you to make such a powerful weapon? Chief, don't look at us. In fact, we don't know how powerful this thing is. Lin Shen originally revealed it to us, but it seems that he was a little shy at that time. Professor Wang saw this scene, and pushed his glasses with a slightly trembling hand, and the corners of his mouth were full of helplessness. What did that guy tell you? The chief suppressed the shock in his heart and asked subconsciously. That guy said that the power of this superconducting electromagnetic gun is estimated to be able to give Shen a middle part. I thought he was joking, but I didn't expect this thing to be real. He really gave Shen a middle part. Professor Wang looked toward Shen again, and everyone nodded. Isn't it like a middle part if you find that the gully is not like a middle part? If you insist on saying that it is a middle part, it seems to be reasonable. When the chief heard this, his face suddenly darkened. He didn't expect that he would actually say that. Are there any other tests next? The chief only felt that everything he experienced was a little science fiction, and he was a little tired today. Originally, the transformation of the tank was completed in a week, which made him feel a little incredible. It even seemed like a dream. But now, the power and performance of this tank are even more terrifying. Not to mention the power. One shot even split the top of the mountain in the middle. The power is comparable to that of a mecha. If this hits the enemy's tank, I'm afraid there will be nothing left. This is the real king of the land. Everyone sighed silently in their hearts. They could almost see how terrible the sensation would be when this tank really appeared on the battlefield. This cyber tank is definitely able to surpass any land weapon in the world. Everyone's heart was shouting wildly, and their eyes were particularly fanatical. The chief exhaled a long breath, and finally a smile appeared on his face. In this way, his mission was successfully completed. The tank not only surpassed the previous tank in terms of performance, but it could even be regarded as a complete crushing. There should be no other tests. The chief turned around and looked at Professor Wang with some uncertainty and asked. Professor Wang shook his head slightly. There are no other aspects. If there is any, it is the ordinary missile launch. The power of these missiles depends entirely on the missiles loaded. It is not much different from ordinary tanks, so it was not included in the test. Chapter 91. Want to mass produce? Machinery is not easy to make. Hearing this, the chief slowly let out a long sigh. As long as there are no other difficult operations to accept, it should not be a big problem. As for those ordinary missiles, they are very familiar with them. After all, they have been using tanks for so many years. If they don't even know the power of ordinary missiles, then they really don't need to mix with them. And now the cyber tank, which can add so many features, is definitely a mecha among tanks. How is it, Chief? Are you satisfied? At this time, several people on the tank had already walked down. Lin Shen had a faint smile on his face, while Zihuan and Zhu Wei were full of shock. Although they also saw the previous shot inside, the impact was far less than that outside. What touched them the most was when the tank drilled directly into the ground. They even felt as if they had traveled through time. When did the tank become able to drill into the ground? Once this function is released, the tank will not only become the king of the land, but also the king of the underground. Satisfied? Why not? This thing is beyond imagination. Once it is sold to the Arabs, they will use it to deal with the eagle sauce. It will be so cool. The chief spoke with a little excitement. At this time, He even felt how miserable the eagle sauce would be this time. When the others heard this, they couldn't help but show a little surprise on their faces. Obviously, they didn't expect that this batch of tanks were urgently required to be produced, not because of any needs on the front line, but they were going to sell them to Arab countries. And more importantly, it seems that Arab countries are still going to use them to fight the eagle sauce. But this is a big news. Even Lin Shen showed a little interest on his face when he heard this. Obviously, they all hate the eagle sauce very much. If these guys can be beaten, perhaps this batch of tanks is really very valuable. Seeing the expectant eyes of the crowd, the chief just smiled and didn't say anything, because this news is not suitable to tell everyone for the time being. It's not because he doesn't trust the people present, but because he is afraid that there will be a rumor that it is not a walk. At that time, it seems that it will not be as good as imagined to use this secret weapon to deal with the eagle sauce. So all of this still has to wait until it is actually sold, and it seems not too late to inform. You can do whatever you want, but I will take Lin Shen with you. Others are waiting to meet this kid. By the way, if possible this time, the superiors also hope that Lin Shen can cooperate with us to transport this new type of tank. Of course, this can only be arranged after the tanks are mass-produced. The leader patted Lin Shen's shoulder with satisfaction, and the others heard this. The eyes flashed with surprise. Obviously, they did not expect that the superiors actually thought of Lin Shen in this way. But thinking about his current attack, it is a bit relieved. He has studied so many new black technologies, and even studied things in science fiction movies. What else can he do? Thinking of this, they all nodded. Lin, keep going. The higher-ups are very optimistic about you, given your achievements. Not to mention us old guys who spend all day in the lab. Even those old guys running around outside are probably not as good as you. But regarding the mass production work, I guess we still need your cooperation. We old guys don't know anything about how to do mass production. Even at this time, Zihuan shook his head helplessly. The others all nodded. In fact, that's what they thought. Hearing about mass production, the leader's eyes had already turned over. Lin, what do you think about mass production? Seeing everyone's eyes cast on him, Lin Shen also pondered for a while. From what I can see, if we want to mass produce the machines, we only need to solve one problem, and there won't be any problem at all. The machines that I have researched on my own may need to be made in large quantities and then distributed to each mass production factory before they can be mass produced. And for these machines, since I don't have the blueprints, I need to go back and make up a copy. When Lin Shen said this, the leaders all nodded with satisfaction. As long as they can mass produce, it seems that everything else is not a difficult matter. As for manufacturing some machines, is it a big deal in their eyes? As long as they can mass produce, it's not a big deal. Just hearing this, Zihuan and Professor Wang turned their heads in surprise. Lin, you said that those machines can be mass produced, and from your tone, it doesn't seem very difficult. As soon as these words came out, everyone present was stunned. Even the leader looked up at Lin Shen with a puzzled look on his face. What's going on? Aren't they just some machines? Why can't they be mass-produced? Even mechas can be made. I think machines should not be a difficult thing for us Chinese, or even for Lin. After the words fell, the chief could clearly see the corners of Zihuan and Professor Wang's mouths twitching slightly. Chief, if you knew how perverted these machines are, I think you wouldn't say this. After a little psychological preparation, Zihuan spoke speechlessly. Do you know how many nanometers the photolithography machine this kid has developed is? As far as I know, the smallest photolithography machine in our country is only 90 nanometers. But what this kid has developed has actually become 9 nanometers. That's 9 nanometers, a full 10-fold improvement in shrinkage, which means that the chip technology can also be improved by more than 10 times. And this level of photolithography is definitely a headache for any production factory. That's why I said that mass production of this thing seems a bit unrealistic. Not to mention other robotic arms, which are all combined dynamic modules. Even its scale is exactly at the level of a crane, so it is a bit unrealistic to want mass production. After Zihuan finished speaking, he shook his head slightly helplessly and sighed. Chapter 92 I owe you a big favor again. After hearing this, The chief was stunned. To be honest, he did not expect that Lin Shen had transformed the technology he made into this. The 9-nanometer lithography machine is not only used in the mechanical field, it can be absolutely leading the way in chips. At present, China's persistence in chips can be said to be the top one, because for a period of time before, China had no ability to develop its own high-end chips. Therefore, chips have always been controlled by foreign countries. However, with the increasingly fierce research of Chinese scientists, they have finally made a name for themselves in the field of chips. However, the research on chips has not stopped, and even in some aspects of future technology, they are also catching up with other countries. With the emergence of the latest lithography machine, China can even be as far ahead as Mecca in the field of chips. This is not just a student who graduated from a university with special approval. This is simply the father and mother of the scientific community. The chief didn't even know what to say to Lin Shen. Even if he asked him to praise him, he couldn't think of any words to praise him. After a while of worrying, he simply ignored it. Anyway, he owed a lot of favors now, so he might as well leave it at that. The chief wanted to give up at this moment. It's not difficult. If I were researching alone, it would be difficult to make it at the beginning. No matter which upgraded machine, it took me a while to make it. But now, this difficulty no longer exists, because a batch of machines on my side have been completed. It will be no problem to use this batch of machines to make other machines first. Lin Shen looked at Zihuan's people with a solemn face, and spoke helplessly. Aren't these machines used to make mechas? How can they be used to make other machines? Zihuan and Professor Wang were stunned when they heard this, and then subconsciously turned their heads to look at Lin Shen. Lin Shen shrugged helplessly. Haven't you two been to other factories? Even if you are obsessed with research, you can't be so obsessed. In the other factories, there are some upgraded equipment and other things. Although it has nothing to do with mechas, I think we will definitely need to produce them in batches in the future, so we can get them in advance. After the voice fell, Zihuan, Professor Wang and others were completely truthful. They looked at Lin Shen silently, and there were 10,000 grass mud horses running through their hearts. Now there is really no word to describe their hard work. It is simply a sin. In other words, it took you a month to build a mecha, but it was not actually the case. And most of the time was spent on those machines? Zihuan suddenly realized something. The moment he looked up and saw it, the hearts of the others were shocked, because they just thought of this fact now. Lin Shen nodded helplessly. There is no need to ask such a thing. Then what else can he do? Obviously, he is studying other things. As for the mecha, to be honest, the first mecha developed is really not valuable, because the cover of the thing is too monotonous. To be honest, the second mecha is indeed a bit of a fine product, but he naturally couldn't say this, and could only complain a little in his heart. Otherwise, he could already imagine what the expressions on other people's faces were like. And then, with the completion of the test of the cyber tank, Lin Shen returned to his leisurely look as usual. In the next period of time, the whole factory should be busy. However, due to the lack of manpower, the chief also specially transferred a group of people from the Scientific Research Institute. The purpose is naturally to take over the operation of the entire factory. Otherwise, those large-scale machines would be impossible to produce. But ordinary workers cannot be recruited, so people can only be found from the Scientific Research Institute. After all, these things are secrets between the entire country. If they are handed over to ordinary people and leaked, it would not be a trivial matter. However, these things are not what Lin Shen needs to worry about. Next, he only needs to go back and fill in the drawings of those machines, then wait for the higher-ups to assign him new tasks. As for the others, to be honest, he doesn't need to do anything at the moment. He also has time to study other things about technology. After all, he hasn't even used his golden finger, which is so powerful in his comprehension, much recently. That's naturally not okay. Isn't it a pure waste if you don't use the golden finger? After returning to the factory, everyone else has started to get busy. There are still many things waiting for them. Whether it's the expansion of the factory or other aspects, they need to do most of the work. Lin Shen hurried back to the office and started drawing the drawings. After the drawings are completed, He needs to help everyone make the first batch of machines that can be put into use, otherwise, there will be no place for mass production. As for Iron Man's things, he doesn't have to worry about anything at all. After all, the difficulty of making Iron Man's armor is much lower than that of Mecha, so there is not much difference whether there is this batch of equipment or not. But if we have this batch of equipment, then the quality of the Iron Man armor produced will naturally be much higher. When the drawings were drawn, it was already 2 hours later. After all, there are more than 100 scattered drawings added up. After all, developing a mecha does not only require a few parts, but also has many other requirements. Otherwise, the whole mecha will not be able to fly, let alone start. Finally, it's done. The group of people arranged by the leader should be here soon. I'll go and take a look. Lin Shen rubbed his temples slightly and spoke with a little headache. For him, these things didn't need him to worry about. But now there are fewer people in the factory, and everyone else is busy, so he can only do it himself. Chapter 93. Isn't this more than what his parents earned by working so hard? After he had arranged everything in the factory, it was basically 3 days later. During these 3 days, Lin Shen finally experienced the joy of being a worker. To be honest, it was not much different from what he had experienced. The only difference was that he worked here for 3 days without any salary. For this, Lin Shen thought about it carefully and found Zihuan. However, Zihuan looked at him as if he was a fool. Did you hear clearly what the leader said to you yesterday? Are you hard of hearing? Lin Shen was full of doubts when he heard this. He really didn't say anything yesterday. Did he really not hear it? You kid, I really don't know what to say to you. You didn't even read the contract given to you by the superiors, and you still have the nerve to tell me that you don't have a salary. Do you know how much profit the superiors give you for each mecha produced? Zihuan spoke unhappily, and even his voice was a little jealous. How much? Lin Shen really didn't know much about this. He didn't even read the contract. He just signed his name on the back. After all, it's not a business, but a cooperation with a national-level figure. What else should he be on guard against? But now it seems that it's not the case. Even Professor Wang was attracted by the movement of the two people. However, when he learned the cause and effect, he covered his cheeks speechlessly and didn't know what to say. Why don't you take out the contract and take a look? After Professor Wang finished speaking, Lin Shen nodded, turned back to the office, and took out the contract. After he carefully read the contents above, the whole person froze in place, and the corners of his mouth twitched slightly, because it was clearly written in the contract that after the factory was built, he would get 10 points of profit for each mecha. Although these 10 points don't seem to be much, it is for each mecha. If a mecha is really to be given to various military units, the price in the East will be at least tens of millions or even hundreds of millions, and this should be considered a relatively low existence. Moreover, it is not just the mecha, but everything that Lin Shen has researched, and he will get a share of 10 points. Wow, how much is this? Just this one clause, I can earn more money than my parents who work hard and work themselves to death. Lin Shen looked at the agreement and took a deep breath. It is called a treaty, but in fact it is a special benefit for him. There is no binding item in this contract. There is not a single point at all, and the only requirement that can be regarded as a request is that the things that Lin Shen has researched should be sold to the country first. And this is just a request, not anything else. Even the attitude of the country is not reflected at all, which is simply worshipping him like a treasure. Now you see clearly, you kid. If you tell me you have no money, don't blame me for turning my face against you. Zihuan and Professor Wang stood at the door, and Zihuan's face was as black as the bottom of a pot. Then he snorted coldly and turned away. Professor Wang also waved his hand helplessly and left to study. Lin Shen's mouth twitched slightly and he threw the contract back into the drawer. He even felt that it was enough for him to lie down completely in this life. No, in the next life, or the next life. Even if he reincarnated for dozens of lives, he would not be able to use up this asset. This time he really had nothing to say. Just as he was sighing, someone outside was already calling him. After leaving the office, he found that the person who came was actually Minister Li. At this time, Minister Li's face was still full of excitement, as if something good was going to happen. Minister Li, What's wrong with you? It looks like there is some happy event. Lin Shen looked at the other party with a smile, while Minister Li touched his cheek with a helpless look on his face. Is my expression so obvious? But you know what? There is really a happy event, and it's not just an ordinary happy event. The chief asked me to come and inform you that there will be a tank exhibition of the King of Land Warfare tomorrow, which will be launched in time. At this King of Land Warfare exhibition, most of our country's most advanced tanks will be on display, as well as the cyber tanks developed by you. In addition, the people who come to participate in this tank exhibition are all wealthy people from other countries, and they all come with the idea of purchasing tanks. And it is said that this time, a certain oil-rich dog owner has prepared far more than 50 billion funds to purchase tanks. In addition, the same is true for Arab oil-rich countries, and their goal is to deal with the eagle sauce in a unified way. Minister Li spoke with a beaming face, and because of his excitement, he seemed to have begun to show a smug look on his face. It seemed that he had already expected that both countries would purchase their country's tanks and then launch a fierce attack on the eagle sauce. How can it be so good? Both countries are very dissatisfied with the eagle sauce, and they don't even look for their own reasons. But this time, it seems that they will not be able to laugh. Lin Shen was naturally happy to hear this. After all, no matter what, the relationship between the eagle sauce and their China is not very good. They are even targeting them everywhere. This is not the most disgusting thing. The most disgusting thing is that they are still creating a friendly atmosphere on the surface. It's as if they are so kind. This is the most disgusting thing. They are two-faced, which is really despicable. They are even worse than the Indian country. At least they dare to act and take responsibility, although it is useless for them to take responsibility. So come with me. The chief personally invited you there. After all, there is the cyber tank you have researched. If possible, this time I will let you meet with buyers from several countries. By the way, let's talk about the project that will be responsible for transportation next time. This is a good diplomatic opportunity. You must seize it. Minister Li patted Lin Shen's shoulder with a kind face, and there was even a strong envy in his eyes. To be honest, he was actually very envious. This was a performance that was valued by the higher-ups. If not, it would be impossible for him to be introduced to meet with representatives from other countries. And from this point, it can be seen that he has obviously become a new generation of national pillars. Chapter 94, King of Land Tank Exhibition. By the way, Academician Z and Academician Wang should also come along. This is a rare opportunity to see the outside world. Minister Li was halfway through his speech when he seemed to remember something and suddenly turned around to speak to Zi Huan and Professor Wang, who were studying on the side. The two were slightly stunned when they heard it, and looked at each other in a daze. They didn't expect that such a thing would actually happen to them. I thought then no matter what, this should at least be something that Lin Shen needed to experience. Why did they suddenly get involved? But since it is something related to national diplomacy, it is not impossible for them to go and see it. So after the two nodded, they all agreed. As for how to be responsible for this factory area, anyway, the three of them have been busy these days and have almost arranged it. And Go Zian is here, so there is no problem with the responsibility of the entire factory area. As for the rest, they don't have to worry about it at all. The head of the department has already arranged people to come and wait for the equipment produced. Once there is a new equipment, it will be immediately released to the surrounding military areas. The purpose of this is to produce it as quickly as possible. Otherwise, why would we be so nervous? When the three people got off the special plane arranged by the above, it was almost dark outside. The destination this time was in the southeastern theater of China. In that area, it has almost become one of the most important places in the entire military. It will also be the place where the distinguished guests from other countries will be received. After all, this is the tank exhibition of the King of Land Warfare, not some other science fiction product exhibition. People who can come here naturally have a little status, so of course they can't be treated like ordinary places. Under such circumstances, anyone who comes here will basically stomp their feet, and the military district will tremble. When Lin Shen and the other two arrived, someone immediately invited them over respectfully. Obviously, the chief had already made arrangements in this area, and he paid extraordinary attention to them. In this regard, Zihuan and Professor Wang were a little unreal. Maybe they had high status in the past. After all, they were all academicians. But it was definitely not that high. Moreover, the two's special research was only in the field of machinery. The most important thing was that the full-body exoskeleton armor had not been developed. But now it was different. Thanks to Lin Shen, the two of them were now studying future products such as Iron Man armor. Any one of them would also be a national treasure. At this time, the so-called national treasure was looking around curiously. This was his first time to visit the military-heavy area, and there was indeed a different feeling in his heart. However, since it was dark outside, he could not see anything for a while. But even so, Lin Shen could still feel a solemn atmosphere around him. This should be the unique atmosphere of the military area. The next morning, the three of them got up early. After eating the breakfast provided by a special person, they were taken to the direction of the venue. As soon as they arrived here, they could find that the area near the venue was already full of soldiers with real guns and ammunition. They looked around with vigilance. Surrounded by many bodyguards, there were countless foreign VIPs who were invaded by the venue. As soon as Lin Shen and the other three arrived, a team of soldiers came towards them. Academician Lin, Academician Z, Academician Wang, we are arranged by the higher-ups to protect your safety. In the next period of time, we will accompany you throughout the battle. After this group of soldiers arrived, they saluted one after another, and then surrounded the three of them and walked into the venue. Although it was the first time they experienced such a scene, the three of them did not have any resistance in their hearts, but instead had a strong sense of intimacy, because these are all soldiers who defend their country. Now they are also performing the tasks they should perform. However, it can be seen from this that this time is indeed very important for the entire China, because this grand occasion is really too big. As soon as they arrived at the inside of the venue, Lin Shen and the others saw several people laughing and talking. The chief was among them. When he saw Lin Shen and the other two coming, his eyes lit up and he waved to them. When the three came over, the chief introduced them to the people around him. Look who I invited. This is our national treasure. The most important thing is his achievements. I don't need to say more about this. After the chief finished speaking, the eyes of the other people all turned to him. After seeing that the person coming was Lin Shen, their eyes lit up like light bulbs. There was surprise, curiosity and even various complex expressions in their eyes. Obviously, they didn't expect that the person coming would be so young. Although everyone was mentally prepared, this preparation was obviously not enough. Is this academician Lin who developed the cyber tank? I didn't expect that he is really young and promising. He is younger than my grandson, but I didn't expect that he has achieved such an achievement. The future of China has you. It's really worry-free. One of the old men touched his beard and said with a smile on his face. The others all nodded, obviously agreeing with what was said. Lin Shen felt a little embarrassed by what he said. Although he didn't know the identities of these people in front of him, he couldn't tell that their identities were definitely not simple. They were not even much lower than the leader. After all, the way they just talked was obviously like a conversation between friends. This means that their identities are at least equal. And he didn't know what to say, so he could only salute and nod in response with a smile. Then, after the others said a few words, the atmosphere eased. Even Zihuan and Professor Wang were complimented a few times. It made these old men feel a little embarrassed. You guys take a look around first. Don't go too far. I'll have someone come to inform you when the exhibition starts. Maybe you'll be needed to make an appearance later. It just so happens that we still have some arrangements to make here, so we won't keep you here for now. After a conversation, the chief spoke with a smile, and the three of them nodded slightly and turned to leave. Chapter 95. The exhibition begins. Two major guests. Then, until the exhibition started, Lin Shen and his three companions wandered around. However, in order to avoid getting into trouble, they did not go too far. They just chatted leisurely nearby. After a while, someone came to inform them that the exhibition was about to start, and the leader wanted to invite them over. After Lin Shen and his three companions nodded slightly, they followed him over. In fact, Their purpose of coming here was just to broaden their horizons. If there was any use, they did not think it would be useful. Diplomacy was not their responsibility, not to mention selling tanks at a high price. When they arrived at the exhibition hall, representatives from several countries had already come forward to ask about the information of the tanks. However, the middle-aged man in military uniform standing at the front just smiled and said nothing. The deputy beside him spoke with a little embarrassment. "I'm sorry, everyone. The exhibition has not started yet, so please wait a moment." As the deputy's voice fell, the other leaders nodded helplessly and retreated. They were indeed a little too hasty. "I'm here. Now that you're here, come and have a look at the exhibition. Let's see what other tanks we have in China besides the cyber tank are like." When the chief saw Lin Shen and the other two arrive, he waved to them with a smile. Then the three of them walked into the venue. When they arrived at the venue, the security personnel of any country stayed outside and did not follow them in. This made the exhibition, which was originally a little crowded, suddenly become much more spacious. But basically, those who can come here are people who have a say in each country. This is the person in charge of our army, Chief Long Yunfei. He is also one of the persons in charge of this exhibition. The chief came to the middle-aged man in military uniform and introduced him to Lin Shen and the other two. "As for these three, I think you should know them without me saying much, Chief Long." The chief looked at Long Yunfei with a smile, and the moment Long Yunfei saw Lin Shen and the other two arrive, his eyes lit up. "Do you need to tell me? Old Z and Old Wang are old acquaintances, and the other one I haven't met is very young, so it can only be Academician Lin. Really young and promising," Long Yunfei said in admiration, casually patting Lin Shen on the shoulder. His face was full of emotion. Obviously, he also got the news about the cyber tank, and was very interested in such a producer, and now that he finally saw it, his face was nothing but relief. In addition, there was even a strong burning color. Lin Shen saw this burning look in chiefly at the time. If nothing unexpected happens, Long Yunfei should also have some demand, especially for this cyber tank. But you can know it with a little brain. After all, this is the chief of the army. Then naturally he wants to seek greater benefits for the army. Lin Shen suddenly realized that it seems that there will be another headache in the future. Let's not talk about other things first. Let's finish this exhibition first. There is still plenty of time later. When the chief saw the expression on Long Yunfei's face, he immediately changed the subject with a smile. He had seen this kind of expression many times, and Chief Li had the same expression when he saw it before. So even if he didn't say it, he already knew that the other party was up to no good. When Long Yunfei heard this, the corners of his mouth twitched slightly, but the smile on his face still did not fade. "That's right, with so many foreign friends here, the exhibition can't be delayed. Come on, the three of you follow me. By the way, I'll also introduce to you the power of other tanks besides the cyber tank," Long Yunfei said, and pulled Lin Shen to the depths of the exhibition. Seeing this, Zihuan and Professor Wang looked even more helpless. The other party said there were three people, but in fact, their eyes were almost all fixed on Lin Shen, and they didn't look at the two of them at all. Although they can be regarded as old acquaintances, is it really good to be ignored like this? It still feels a bit bad. But at this moment, they didn't care so much, and the two of them walked forward together. Anyway, the other party was talking about the three of them, so it was natural to follow them now. When the chief heard this, his face suddenly darkened. He had already given a copy of Lin Shen's tank drawings. Among them was the latest Chinese tank, and all the models were included. "I just don't know if it has been used." "Do you still need to introduce it now? This is simply full of bad water. Anyone who changes to someone else can see that this guy definitely has an intention." However, the chief shook his head slightly. "You don't want to care about this matter, so just let him go." After following Long Yunfei to the depths of the exhibition, the deputy who was originally with Long Yunfei was now facing those foreign friends. There were many people in military uniforms near the exhibition who were introducing the functions and power of tanks. In the deepest part of the exhibition, there were already two groups of people waiting. "Captain Long, I have heard of your name for a long time." After seeing Long Yunfei coming, the two groups of people stood up one after another, with warm smiles on their faces. These two have a lot of money. The voice was very low, and only Lin Shen could hear it clearly. Thinking of hearing this, Lin Shen's eyes lit up. It should be because of the ownership of the newly mined oil field that they are now making a fuss. Lin Shen couldn't help but feel a little excited. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelist. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We are waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 96. Are you kidding? Betting on friendship between nations. That's right, we heard that a secret weapon was prepared during the discussion. The power of that secret weapon should be more terrifying than ordinary tanks, so this is our goal. As for other tanks, we will also purchase some. The person in charge of the Arab oil power was a middle-aged man in his 30s. His eyes were deep and he looked at Long Yunfei with a smile on his face. Hearing this, Long Yunfei nodded slightly. That's true, and this secret weapon has already appeared at the exhibition, but it hasn't been on stage yet. I think you will like this secret weapon. After Long Yunfei finished speaking, Lin Shen could clearly see that the eyes of the person in charge of the Arab oil power lit up. There was even a strong sense of expectation in it. They should have been exploiting the oil fields for a long time, but the shameless guys like the Eagle Sauce actually took advantage of the powerful power of their weapons and came directly to prepare to force them to take them away. But the Arab oil power is not to be underestimated, and they naturally fought back. Even several other small oil countries around them have united. In addition, Xinjiang's move naturally angered Du, an oil-rich country with a similar status to Arabia. The two countries have joined forces and are currently discussing urgently how to repel the attack of Eagle Sauce. While everyone was chatting, several other countries that came to participate in this exhibition also came over with the deputy. In just over half an hour, the introduction was completed. The purpose of the exhibition is actually just to let everyone take a look. Its real purpose is naturally the sales event after this. And almost everyone who came here today is rushing to buy tanks. If not, the higher-ups would certainly not be so concerned about this exhibition. And now, this opportunity has come. Seeing that the others were walking slowly, Long Tanyun also slowly walked out and came to the front of everyone. I think everyone should be quite satisfied with this exhibition. But in addition to the tanks you have seen so far, this time we have also prepared a secret weapon. Please wait and see. After Long Tanyun finished speaking, the deputy pressed a button on the side. At this time, everyone discovered that a wall in the deepest part of the exhibition hall was actually slowly descending. There was actually a partition inside. Everyone was shocked. Even in the exhibition hall, there was such a large-scale defense. It was enough to prove the magnitude of the exhibits this time. It was obviously more powerful than the tanks outside. After the wall slowly fell, everyone saw the tank inside clearly. The eyes that were originally expectant froze when they fell on the tank. Everyone looked at the tank with an unbelievable look. After a few seconds of silence, the person in charge of the dog family, who was also the crown prince, spoke. Is this the secret weapon you prepared? But the appearance looks a bit like a toy tank. I hope you don't use this kind of thing to fool us when you are so serious. The crown prince of the dog family looked very serious, and the other countries nodded. This shows that they are more in favor of this point. After all, everyone spent time coming here to see the tank. If we waste time here, it's obviously not worth it. They still have many other important things to do. Long Yunfei was not surprised by the reactions of the crowd. Even the chief felt that this tank looked like a toy when he first saw it, let alone other people. But after seeing its power, basically no one dared to raise any objections. Because the power of this thing has far exceeded the nature of a tank. Anyone who has seen the power of this tank has been scared out of their wits. How could they still object? Long Tanyun pressed his hand slightly towards the crowd, and his face still had that smile. Everyone, please be patient. To be honest, the moment I saw this tank, I thought it was a toy tank. But in fact, it is not. This is the secret weapon among the current tanks, the cyber tank. Next, I will introduce this cyber tank to you. There will also be a test session for the cyber tank later. Please rest assured, I will not disappoint your friendship and come to entertain you." As soon as these words came out, most of the doubts that had arisen in the hearts of others were dispelled. They naturally saw the firmness in Long Tanyun's words, so this was obviously not a joke. But in addition to this, what everyone is looking forward to is the test of the cyber tank later. If it is really just an empty shell, there will definitely be no test link. Even Long Tanyun has brought up the friendship between several countries. If he still entertains them at this time, wouldn't it be a provocation to their friendship? After I read the test data, this cyber tank can be called the king of land warfare. You can even say that it completely crushes any tank in the world. The performance introduction of this cyber tank is indeed a bit too much. But I have prepared a general datasheet of the cyber tank for everyone, and I will distribute it next. As Long Yunfei finished speaking, his deputy took a stack of small notebooks and distributed them one by one. The moment everyone got the small notebooks, they all looked into them. To be honest, they were even more curious about this toy-like tank. What kind of tank can be called the king of land that crushes all tanks in the world? You know, even Eagle Sauce. I'm afraid it can't say this now. And they heard a strong confidence from it, which proves that maybe this tank is really the king of land. Soon, everyone finished reading the data in the manual. As they raised their heads, they even showed a little weird expression on their faces. The crown prince of the dog family did not look very happy at this moment. "Excuse me for being blunt, this tank of yours is like a product of the science fiction world. It is completely virtual." Chapter 97 Witness the test. After the words of the crown prince of Diehe fell, everyone present was basically stunned. However, some people showed some expectation in their eyes. Obviously, they also thought so in their minds. It's just that there are only some small countries here, and only Arabia and Diehe are big countries. So under such circumstances, if these two countries don't speak up, the other small countries certainly don't dare to speak up. Otherwise, offending China will naturally not be a good result for them. But now that the people of Diehe have spoken, the others are naturally waiting to see the show. And the content in your manual is really too fake. How could there be such a tank in the world? It is well known that the tank itself is the king of land. We may be able to accept other aspects, but is this so-called underground escape really serious? The crown prince of Diehe said this, and his tone was slightly paused. Minister Long, in fact, this is not that I look down on China's technology, but I am a military college student who returned from studying in Eagle Sauce. I think all this is too sci-fi and completely unrealistic. His voice was very light, but his tone was particularly firm. When the others heard this, they all nodded. This was also what they thought in their hearts. The representatives of the Arab oil giants also fell into silence when they heard this. However, Long Tanyun was not surprised by such a scene, because when he saw this information, he was actually more shocked than everyone else. He even scolded the person in charge of the report. He thought that these were all data uploaded by AI to fool him. It was not until he saw the test of this cyber tank with his own eyes that he was shocked for 2 days before he came to his senses. Until now, he has truly confirmed that the cyber tank was indeed developed by them. After all, he saw it with his own eyes. How could it be faked? If you don't trust others, you should always believe your own eyes. Yes, in fact, we think so. According to the previous cooperation, it can be seen that the relationship between us and China is very deep. I don't have any intention of actively looking for trouble. I just want to verify whether this information is true. After all, we are in a hurry recently. Seeing that the atmosphere was a little awkward, one of the leaders of the Arab oil giant also stood up and smiled and then spoke. The rest of the countries nodded. Don't worry. China will definitely not deceive you on such a big matter. As for the specific situation, I guess it doesn't count if I say it. You will believe it when you see it with your own eyes. Let's go. Next I will take you to test the performance of this cyber tank. After Long Yunfei finished speaking, he didn't stop at all, waved his hand and walked out first. The deputy beside him also called on everyone to follow. The faces of the other countries showed doubts. Obviously, they were still very skeptical about the cyber tank. But since Long Yunfei was going to test it, it wouldn't be a problem for them to spend some time to take a look. I just don't know if it's a waste of time. They shook their heads helplessly and followed him. Forget it. Even if it's fake, it's okay to waste some time. After all, they are friendly powers, and the direction of purchase is not the cyber tank. There are enough other tanks to meet their needs. If it doesn't work, just treat it as a fun thing. Even the two countries of Arab oil power and dog big households think so in their hearts. After all, the previous tanks have made them very satisfied. This technology is not even much worse than that of the Eagle sauce. This is one of the reasons why they came to China to buy tanks this time. After a while, under the leadership of Long Yunfei, everyone came to a nearby forest test site. Everyone was still confused about the location of the test site, because there are strange rocks here. It doesn't look like a serious test site at all. Could it be that they are going to build some kind of airplane? In a normal test site, it is naturally impossible to see how terrifying the performance of this cyber tank is, but testing the cyber tank in this wilderness area can fully demonstrate the performance of the cyber tank. Long Yunfei seemed to see the doubts of the crowd, then smiled slightly and walked aside. The others also came to the side one after another. After waiting for a few minutes, someone couldn't help but ask, but suddenly, a bright color appeared in the distance. It was the cartoon-like color of the cyber tank, which was slowly coming from a distance. The moment they saw the cyber tank start, almost everyone on the scene subconsciously clenched their fists. Their eyes were wide open, because they could indeed see that this cyber tank, which was originally defined as a fake product, actually started. This thing is not just an empty shell. But just starting it is not enough to make everyone look forward to it. What if this thing is just covered with the skins of an ordinary tank? So to be honest, we still have to wait until the performance test starts before we can make a certain degree of judgment. At this time, the people sitting in the driver's cabin were naturally Lin Shen, the manufacturer of this tank, and Zihuan and Professor Wang who came with him. After all, in terms of familiarity with tanks, the three of them are naturally top-notch. After all, the tanks were all developed by them, so how could anyone be more familiar with tanks than them? Start the test. Long Yunfei waved at the tank, and the cyber tank had already driven towards the rocky area in front. Everyone's eyes were fixed on the place where the cyber tank was, because the next section of the road was an uneven rocky area. Even if an ordinary tank was walking in this area, the speed would be extremely slow, and it might even be stuck by the ups and downs of the rocks. If this section could be truly stable, perhaps the performance of this tank would be countless times better than what they had seen before. The cyber tank soon came to the edge of the road. Under Lin Shen's control, the tracks of the cyber tank began to change. In the uneven area, the tracks were up and down, almost completely close to the terrain. Chapter 98 The True King of the Land. When they saw this scene again, almost everyone took a step forward. Their eyes bulged out, and each of them was as big as a copper bell. There were even continuous sounds of people sucking in cold air. Question marks seemed to appear in everyone's heads. They were all wondering why the tracks became like this. Shouldn't normal tracks be flat? If this continues, how can they move? But then, the doubts in their hearts disappeared directly. The tracks began to become uneven, and the speed of the tank was slowly increasing. From the original slow driving, it became at least 50 or 60 yards, speeding across the uneven ground. And in the sight of everyone, the uneven tracks were constantly changing with the ground. Its speed will also become faster and faster as the speed of the tank increases. This feeling is like a program that is running according to the setting. This track design is almost a complete subversion of the tank. It makes me feel that other tanks seem to be extremely bulky. This so-called cyber tank may really become the king of land warfare. The Arab oil giants who saw this scene showed a strong joy on their faces. Even the crown prince who had just raised doubts was silent at this moment, just staring at the moving tank with wide eyes in shock. He was indeed a little early to say what he just said. Even with the knowledge he gained from graduating from the top university in the United States, he could not fully analyze the principle of this tank. Logically speaking, normal tracks should not be like this. So how should this be done? There is no need to talk about the rest. Now we may unilaterally announce that the design of this track alone is enough to make the tank the most advanced tank in the world. After discussing it, the other small countries all showed appreciation on their faces. And this point has also been recognized by countless people. Seeing this, Long Yunfei smiled slightly. This is the effect he wants. But this is just the beginning. If other people see the back, they will be shocked. But then, the speed of the tank seemed to be endless, and it was still increasing crazily. Just like a speeding sports car, it rushed through the 1 to 2 kilometers rocky land in a flash. It even turned around at the end and rushed back in a flash. When the tank returned to the crowd, almost everyone swallowed subconsciously. When they looked at the cyber tank again, the burning in their eyes could not be concealed at all, because it was too shocking for them. This kind of tank is just right for their battle with the Eagle Sauce. The road over there is not easy to walk, and what they need is a tank with high stability. As for the attack power, it is still relatively secondary. After all, the normal tank attack is enough. It just needs a better attack direction. Minister Long, it seems that our trust in China is right. It turns out that China's technological level is far superior to that of the United States. Even the United States has no chance of making such a thing. I apologize for my previous rudeness. The crown prince of the dog family came to Long Yunfei and bowed slightly to him to express his apology. But Long Yunfei didn't care about it at all. After all, other people can doubt things that even he himself doubted. In fact, there is no need to be like this. Even when I saw it, I had the same idea as you. To be honest, I chose to believe it after reading it. What's more, with our friendship, we naturally can't joke about such things. Long Yunfei smiled and shook his head, but in fact he was still secretly happy. Although the previous words were human nature, everyone who heard them felt unhappy. However, now that the other party apologized with such a sincere attitude, this slight unhappiness naturally disappeared. After all, knowing one's mistakes and being able to correct them is naturally a great virtue. Please continue to watch the test. The performance test of the cyber tank has just begun. As soon as these words came out, almost everyone was shocked. Then they suddenly remembered what was written in the previous manual. It said that the tank could also drill into the ground. They were a little skeptical at first, but now it seems to be true. But no matter how hard they thought, they couldn't figure out how the tank should drill into the ground. You know, even a normal drill can't drill into the ground in a short time. Not to mention a tank. Even if a tank has the ability to drill into the ground, how much effect can it play in the ever-changing situation of the battlefield? No one knows this. They even feel incomprehensible. Then, after strolling back, the cyber tank once again drove towards a distance. However, there was a small hill blocking it at this time, and the cyber tank's destination was under this hill. As it moved forward, the surface of the cyber tank began to change. I saw that the place that was supposed to belong to the gun barrel had actually begun to concave to the side. The side that was originally hidden inside the tank was also rotated out. At first glance, it turned out to be a drill. Almost everyone froze when they saw the drill. They had never expected that the drill would appear in this form. Could it be that the tank can really drill into the ground? The next second, the tank's originally weird shape tilted slightly downward. The moment the drill drilled into the ground, the drill began to run wildly. Then, a big pit appeared on the ground in almost a few seconds. The body of the tank slowly disappeared from everyone's sight. There was only a slight vibration sound on the ground. It came from under everyone's feet. No way. This thing can really drill into the ground. And the speed of this thing drilling into the ground is so fast. Even ordinary drills can't be that fast. How is this possible? Am I still asleep? Oh my god, this is the real king of the land. Even tanks can drill into the ground. Today really refreshed my 3 views. I feel that all my knowledge in this life has collapsed today. Chapter 99 is about the energy issue. How is it solved? At this point, Long Yunfei paused again, and then spoke again. This superconducting laser cannon method is also the first time we have used it on tanks so far. The attack power is far greater than that of missiles, and there is no need for filling. Words are not enough. Let's take a look. After Long Yunfei finished speaking, everyone looked in the direction of the cyber tank. They were particularly curious about the attack method of this superconducting electromagnetic cannon. And listening to the name, it seems like something out of a science fiction movie. After all, whose real weapon uses an electromagnetic cannon to attack? Maybe there really is, but their current level of technology cannot do this at all. At this time, the cyber tank had already adjusted its position. The direction the tank was facing was a hill more than 10 kilometers away. This hill was not high, only more than 50 meters high, and it was similar to a small mount. Long Yunfei even gave the others a pair of binoculars. After all, it was more than 10 kilometers away, and it was not very clear if you just looked at it like this. But at the same time, he also told everyone to wait until the attack was over before watching through the telescope, otherwise it might cause irreversible damage to everyone. The others were also very obedient and watched silently. The drill of the cyber tank had already been retracted from the side, and the next one was the very small gun barrel. But in fact, this was not a gun barrel. Only after getting close could you find that this thing was actually something similar to electromagnetic guidance. As the cyber tank vibrated slightly, the gun barrel-like existence in front began to emit a faint blue light. Then, 3 seconds later, a light blue beam of light burst out. Even the air had burst into crackling sounds, as if high-voltage electricity was instantly blooming above. In just a blink of an eye, the light blue beam directly penetrated the small hill more than 10 kilometers away. This time the target was the top of the hill, and the caliber of the penetration seemed to just fit the top of the hill. It directly flattened a part of the top. The hill, which was originally just over 50 meters long, was flattened by about 4 or 5 meters. At the same time, there was even a light blue light shining on the top of the hill. At this time, everyone suddenly reacted, as if they remembered something, and quickly took out the telescope to watch. There was no sign of attack on the top of the hill, as if it had evaporated out of thin air. Perhaps it can prove that this is not a dream, but the light blue arcs left on the spot. After shining for a minute or two, those arcs slowly dissipated. Everyone was stunned when they saw this, and they gasped fiercely. Even some people with poor psychological endurance have begun to pinch their own philtrum to stay awake. This thing is not something that they can see in this era. No wonder they say this is a superconducting electromagnetic cannon. This is really an electromagnetic cannon. The light blue power is completely in the form of superconductivity converted from electrical energy, condensed into a cannon and blasted out. It even flattened the top of the mountain. This terrifying power made everyone gasp. This is not a tank at all. It is clearly a mobile turret. It can hit whatever you point at. Even if it is attacked by an intercontinental missile, the effect may not be as good as the effect of a single shot from this electromagnetic gun. Although the power of an intercontinental missile is far greater than that of this electromagnetic gun, an intercontinental missile can even destroy half of a city. However, the cost of an intercontinental missile is greater. It is basically a national weapon, and under normal circumstances, it is at the same level as a nuclear weapon. But what about this electromagnetic gun? This is not the case. Not to mention that the energy storage time is only a few seconds, which alone is not comparable to an intercontinental missile. And this thing is installed on a tank and is movable. This is the situation that makes everyone's eyes light up. This level of scientific research is simply admirable to us. The person in charge of the Arabs spoke solemnly. Long Yunfei's face was also solemn at this time, and after a solemn response, the expressions of the three parties were relieved, especially the Arabs and the dog owners. The faces of the heads of these two major countries have been completely relaxed at this time. They all knew that with the existence of such a terrifying weapon, it might not be necessary to go to great lengths to deal with the Eagle Sauce. Just ordinary tank troops were needed to directly wipe it out, which would only make the other side dare not invade them again. As for the rest, that was not a problem. In fact, what the two countries valued most was not just the developed cyber tank. From the development of this cyber tank, we can know what the level of technology is. Many of the elements in it are simply things that other countries in the world have not been able to develop so far. With such a high level of technology, it turned out that China had already surpassed the Eagle Sauce in private and became the world's #1. Before that, they also heard that China had already unlocked the secret of controlled nuclear fusion. The power supply currently used throughout the country is also provided for controlled nuclear fusion. and the country has begun to build nuclear power plants with controlled nuclear fusion on a large scale. This has caused an uproar all over the world. Even countless countries want to talk to China about the technology of controlled nuclear fusion, but so far, this technology is still locked. But other countries don't dare to use force at all, because the current China is far from being invaded at will. Otherwise, it might not be that simple. By the way, we have a few more questions about the cyber tank. How is the energy source solved? Is there any problem with Chapter 100? Absolutely not. As soon as these words came out, they attracted the attention of almost everyone present. They all looked over. Suddenly, they thought of such a serious question. After all, the power of this superconducting laser cannon is indeed very great, but the energy aspect has been ignored by them, and there is also the energy of drilling the ground. If you really count it, the amount is simply terrifying. So if this part cannot be properly solved, the so-called king of the land is just a temporary weapon and will not play a long-term role at all. So they also want to hear how Long Yunfei will respond to this. Listening to the questions of others, Long Yunfei smiled slightly. Obviously, he had expected these people to ask such questions. As for the energy aspect, he was also worried at the beginning, but after understanding the real situation, he was not worried at all. I'm sure you all have heard about energy. We in China have developed controlled nuclear fusion technology, and it has even begun to spread throughout the country. Then the energy of this cyber tank is naturally converted from the technology of controlled nuclear fusion. Let's put it this way. The energy stored in the cyber tank is more than 50 times the energy that a rocket uses to go into space and back. As soon as this was said, everyone present took a deep breath. Needless to say, the energy that a rocket uses to go into space is absolutely massive, and this amount of energy is more than 1/50th of the energy stored in the cyber tank. Under normal circumstances, it would be impossible to do this. After all, the cyber tank is so small that it is impossible to store so much energy. But after hearing about controlled nuclear fusion, everyone opened their mouths slightly but couldn't say a word of doubt. Obviously, this was also a very shocking thing for them. China is not only able to convert all controlled nuclear fusion into electricity for national use, they have even begun to develop the use of guest republic and fusion in weapons. Today it is a cyber tank, and tomorrow it may be used on airplanes. It is not impossible to use it on aviation rockets and other things. The more they think about it, the more shocked they are, because beyond what they know, China has come so far without them realizing it. It is not only the first in the world, but it has even come to the forefront of the times, and the feeling of belonging in their hearts has naturally become more and more obvious. After all, China is so powerful. If they have a good relationship with China, do they still need to worry about other things? The answer is obvious. That is completely unnecessary. So under such circumstances, the rest of the people were silent, but they have already begun to think about how to build a good relationship with China in the future. After the energy problem is solved, I will take the initiative to explain to you the attack method of ordinary artillery shells. The shells of the cyber tank are not fired by the front barrel. The front one only acts on the condensation and firing of the superconducting electromagnetic gun. This can also play a side camouflage effect. The place where the cyber tank actually stores the barrels is on both sides. Long Yunfei looked at the people thinking and had an idea in his mind. At their status, when talking to people of equal status, they can basically know what the other party wants to say, ask, or even know at a glance. As soon as this was said, the others also raised their heads. Their eyes lit up with anticipation. Originally, they were going to ask about it, but Long Yunfei took the initiative to explain it at this time, which was naturally the best. As Long Yunfei's voice fell, two long strips of frames were drawn on the sides of the cyber tank, similar to the edges of the tracks. Everyone followed Long Yunfei to the front of the tank and could clearly see that there were two barrels in the two long strips of frames. This is how our cyber tank shells are fired, and the shells fired do not need to be reloaded manually. There are 20 shells stored on each side above the tracks on both sides. Only after all the shells have been fired do they need to be reloaded. And the reloading method is also very simple, and there is no need to reload from the inside, just reload from the outside. While talking, Long Yunfei came to the side of the cyber tank barrel and gently pressed a raised area above the barrel. Then the upper edge popped open, revealing the shells that were already ready to be fired. A little surprise flashed in everyone's eyes. The method of reloading shells from the outside is indeed a rare case in the history of missiles. Generally, the barrel extends to the cockpit of the missile. In addition to the driver, there are also people responsible for reloading shells and attacking. But it will take some time to get the shells inside. But if it can be reloaded from the outside, then the cyber tank only needs to stroll around outside, and when it returns to the camp, there will be a special person to reload it. So in terms of convenience, it far exceeds the normal tank, not to mention the performance. And there are 20 missiles on each side. This capacity alone is beyond that of ordinary tanks. In short, the performance of this cyber tank is already world-class. No, it is science fiction level. Everyone's face showed a burning look. And then the two major countries of Arabia and the Dog Big family just waved their hands and confirmed it. Minister Long, we don't have any problems anymore. It's the same as before. We want as many cyber tanks as we can. Money is not a problem at all. We can even agree to help you in other aspects. The heads of the two countries looked at Long Yunfei sincerely. They didn't even limit the help to other things. In other words, as long as China can put forward conditions, they will agree unconditionally and do their best. What kind of courage is this? Okay. Since this matter has been decided, the tank exhibition will be successfully concluded at this time. We can also talk about the acquisition in detail, Long Yunfei said while making a gesture of invitation. All the heads of countries who wanted to purchase tanks followed Long Yunfei to another direction. As for the others, there would be special people to send them away from the venue. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.